Chapter 1. Wenxue, these are the cultivation resources for next month. Here you go. Qin Chuan handed the shabby cloth bag to the elegant girl standing in front of him. He was panting slightly, and his face looked slightly tired. Wang Wenxue lowered her head and looked at the shabby cloth bag that Qin Chuan handed over. Seeing the black stains on the cloth bag, a complicated look flashed across her beautiful eyes. She didn't reach out to take the shabby cloth bag for a long time. Qin Chuan seemed to have noticed Wang Wenxue's resistance to the shabby cloth bag. He pursed his lips slightly. I just finished a part-time job and came here in a hurry. I didn't have any. Qin Chuan, what is your brain development? How many types of low-grade yellow-level runes have you grasped from the teacher's teachings? Wang Wenxue suddenly interrupted Qin Chuan's explanation. At this time, she didn't want to hear any explanation because it was unnecessary and meaningless. Qin Chuan looked at Wang Wenxue and was slightly stunned. This was the first time that Wang Wenxue was concerned about his cultivation progress since he entered high school. Although he felt it was a little strange, Qin Chuan still answered Wang Wenxue's question truthfully. We've known each other since we were young. Don't you understand me? My brain development is only at 25%. I've only grasped one type of low-grade yellow-level rune that the teacher taught me, the clear water rune. When it came to his studies, Qin Chuan appeared magnanimous on the outside, but he was extremely unwilling to accept it on the inside. Ever since he came into contact with brain development and meditation runes classes in high school, he had been studying wholeheartedly. Every day, apart from attending classes and working part-time jobs, he spent almost all of his time on brain development and meditation runes. He only slept for a short 3 hours every day. However, no matter how hard Qin Chuan worked, he still didn't achieve any good result. Now that 2.5 years of high school had passed, the average student's brain development was around 40%. However, Qin Chuan's was only 25%. The college entrance examination was coming in half a year. If his brain development was still at 25%, he might lose the opportunity to enter university and could only enter a vocational school. He would never be able to become a cultivator. Wang Wenxue, who was also a child from the slums, displayed an amazing talent for cultivation after entering high school. Not only did her brain development reach 65%, but she also grasped 9 types of low-grade yellow-level runes and 4 types of mid-grade yellow-level runes. She was a genius in the elite class and was known as the goddess of the state capital No. 2 high school. Thinking back, Qin Chuan was able to enter the state capital No. 2 high school because of Wang Wenxue. Therefore, Qin Chuan had always been grateful to Wang Wenxue. After learning of Wang Wenxue's amazing talent for cultivation, he even used all of his hard-earned money to buy cultivation resources to help Wang Wenxue in her cultivation. This was to repay Wang Wenxue's kindness. Hearing Qin Chuan's honest answer, Wang Wenxue frowned slightly. She rarely paid attention to Qin Chuan's cultivation progress. She didn't expect Qin Chuan's results to be so poor. If you want to enter a good university, you have to at least develop your brain to 50% and above in high school. Also, you have to grasp at least 5 types of low-grade yellow-level runes and 2 types of mid-grade yellow-level runes. With your current results, it's almost certain that you won't be able to enter university. The universe was vast, and the cultivators of the 3,000 worlds respected runes. Only by mastering the power of runes could one be qualified to become a cultivator. The development of one's brain was closely related to the speed at which one could control runes. The higher the development of one's brain, the less time it would take to control runes and the more precise the control of runes would be. Therefore, the development of one's brain basically determined whether one could become a cultivator in the future. With Qin Chuan's current level of brain development, it was destined that he would not be able to become a cultivator in the future. Naturally, he would lose the qualification to enter university. Of course, Qin Chuan knew that with his current results, It was basically wishful thinking to enter university and become a cultivator. However, as long as the college entrance examination wasn't around the corner, he wasn't willing to give up on any possibility. Heaven rewarded the diligent. Before everything was settled, he still had a chance. This was Qinchuan's insistence. No one could shake his conviction and determination. Seeing Qinchuan remain silent, Wang Wenxue thought that her words had hurt Qinchuan's self-esteem. She sighed softly. Take these cultivation resources back and use them yourself. In the future, you don't have to send cultivation resources to me anymore. Qinchuan looked at Wang Wenxue in surprise. Your college entrance examination goal is to enter the 6 major universities. You need these cultivation resources more than I do. The 6 major universities only accepted geniuses. Although Wang Wenxue's results were good, it was still somewhat unstable for her to enter the 6 major universities. These cultivation resources were absolutely important to Wang Wenxue. Qinchuan, face reality. It's impossible for us to be together. Facing Qinchuan's insistence, Wang Wenxue frowned and said in a deep voice, after the college entrance examination ends in half a year, I will definitely enter the 6 major universities and become a 1 in a million cultivators. You, on the other hand, can only enter a specialized academy and become an ordinary person among the masses. We are destined to not be people of the same world. No matter how good you are to me, I will never be tempted by you. Give up. Qinchuan looked at Wang Wenxue with some astonishment. He didn't think that Wang Wenxue would misunderstand that he liked her. Thus, he explained with a smile, Wenxue, you misunderstood. Seeing that Qinchuan still wanted to quibble, Wang Wenxue's face couldn't help but sink. She said in a cold voice, let's not meet again in the future. I'm afraid that Lu Qing will misunderstand me. To tell you the truth, I have already promised Lu Qing that after I graduate from high school, I will become his girlfriend. He will provide me with a huge amount of cultivation resources in the future. Even during the summer vacation after the college entrance examination, I can learn the Lu family's low-grade profound level runes that have been passed down for generations. I can come into contact with a higher world earlier than my peers. Do you understand what I mean? As everyone knew, runes were divided into 4 levels: heaven, earth, profound, and yellow. The yellow level was just the foundation, and the profound level was the real beginning. Only by mastering the profound level runes could one be considered to have truly stepped into the world of cultivators. Wang Wenxue said all this to make Qinchuan realize the reality. It was absolutely impossible between them. Looking at the resolute expression on Wang Wenxue's face, Qinchuan suddenly laughed. He worked so hard to provide Wang Wenxue with cultivation resources purely because he wanted to repay her kindness. He didn't have any improper thoughts about Wang Wenxue. Previously, he wanted to explain clearly, but now, he felt that there was no need to explain. In that case, I'll give you my blessings. Qinchuan smiled and gave his blessings. Then, he took his shabby cloth bag and turned to leave. Looking at Qinchuan's departing figure, Wang Wenxue didn't know why she didn't feel relieved in her heart. Instead, she felt some faint regret, as if she had missed out on something. Chapter 2. Sitting on the giant Rune train heading home, Qinchuan's eyes gradually revealed a trace of confusion as he looked out the window at the bustling city that flashed past. He was confused, not because he had cut off contact with Wang Wenxue, but because he was confused as to what he should do in order to increase his strength enough to enter a university before the college entrance examination. In a day of 24 hours, apart from sleeping for 3 hours, Qinchuan had 10 hours to work, another 10 hours to cultivate, and the remaining 1 hour to eat and rest. This kind of life had already continued for 2.5 years. However, the principle of "the clumsy bird flies first" seemed to have lost its effect on Qinchuan. The progress he made after diligently cultivating for 10 hours was not even as much as the gains his classmates made after cultivating for 2 hours, let alone compared to the geniuses of the important class. If it was someone else, perhaps they would have long given up on cultivating and resigned themselves to their fate. However, Qin Chuan was different. Having walked out of the slums, he was fully aware that becoming a cultivator was the only way to change his fate. He could not give up, and he absolutely would not give up. In the past, Qin Chuan had provided the majority of his cultivation resources to Wang Wenxue, leaving only a small portion for himself to cultivate. Now that Wang Wenxue no longer needed the cultivation resources he provided, the amount of cultivation resources he could use every month was much more abundant than before. Relying on these cultivation resources, his strength would certainly be able to greatly increase during this period of time. Thinking of cultivation resources, Qin Chuan could not help but reach his hand into the shabby canvas bag at his waist. From within, he took out a simple and small palm-sized bronze square box. Looking at the ancient bronze box in his hand, Qin Chuan rejoiced in his heart. This was because today, he had almost lost this family heirloom that had accompanied him since childhood. Originally, in order to repay Wang Wenxue's kindness and give her a greater chance of entering the Big Six, Qin Chuan had planned to sell this bronze square box to Wang Wenxue in exchange for even more cultivation resources. Now that Wang Wenxue had cut off all ties with him, there was naturally no need for him to sell this bronze square box. Old friend, I almost sold it to you today. After so many years, I still haven't been able to open it. What do you think you're hiding inside? Qin Chuan muttered to himself as he looked at the bronze square box. Suddenly, he seemed to see a golden light flash across the bronze square box. Just as Qin Chuan was wondering if his eyes were playing tricks on him, the giant Rune train slowly came to a stop. An announcement rang in his ears. He had arrived at the station and had to get off. Qin Chuan took one last look at the bronze square box that had not changed. He then put the bronze square box back into his pocket. He then got off the giant Rune train and stepped onto the only train platform in the slum. Breathing in the unique sour smell in the air of the slum, Qin Chuan's face revealed a slight expression of enjoyment. This was not because he liked to torture himself, but simply because he had gotten used to the filthy air in the slum. In layman's terms, this was the feeling of coming home. Qin Chuan's home was near the platform. It was a simple 2-story building. The first floor was where Qin Chuan lived, and the second floor was where Qin Chuan cultivated. It was already dinner time, but Qin Chuan was not in a hurry to eat. He wanted to go to the second floor to meditate on runes and cultivate for 2 hours before eating dinner. The second floor was called a cultivation room, but in fact, it only had a tattered futon and an old rune chandelier. It was very simple and crude. Qin Chuan came to the second floor and sat down on the futon. He casually took off his waist bag and placed it aside. He was about to enter a state of meditation. At this moment, a hazy golden light suddenly lit up in his waist bag. It was as if a small artificial sun had been placed in the bag. It was blazing and boiling hot. Looking at the glowing pocket, Qin Chuan opened his eyes wide in surprise. Just as he was about to reach out and pick up the pocket to take a look, the shabby pocket suddenly disintegrated and turned into fine dust, revealing the bronze square box inside. The blazing golden light was emitted from the bronze square box. The bronze square box emitted more and more golden light, and it became hotter and hotter. Gradually, it condensed into a golden door that was as tall as a person in front of Qin Chuan. The bronze square box had become the frame of the golden door, and it exuded a strong and desolate aura. It was like a giant beast that had been sleeping since ancient times was slowly waking up. Just as Qin Chuan was shocked by the change in the bronze square box, the bronze door that was emitting a golden light suddenly burst out with a strong suction force, sucking the shocked Qin Chuan into the door. Where is this? Qin Chuan's body floated in a vast and boundless starry sky. A huge continent floated in front of him, He could clearly see that there were countless stone pillars on this continent. Each stone pillar was engraved with complex and mysterious runes, exuding a desolate and simple aura. Looking at the seemingly endless stone pillars and runes in front of him, Qin Chuan was stunned. He had lived for 17 years, and this was the first time he had seen such a magnificent scene. The countless golden runes seemed to have turned into a vast ocean, bobbing up and down in front of him, exuding a power that made one's heart palpitate. Suddenly, the towering stone pillars on the continent began to shatter. Countless runes fell from the pillars, turning into rootless duckweeds. The powerful energy contained within was like a ferocious beast that had just escaped from its cage. It erupted with a world-destroying might, shattering the entire continent. The continent fell apart and the stone pillars were destroyed. After the golden runes erupted with peerless power, they slowly began to dissipate. Just as these runes were about to completely disappear, a small bronze square box suddenly appeared from the fragments of the continent. This bronze square box instantly turned into a huge bronze door, and an intense suction force erupted from it. All the runes floating in the starry sky were sucked into the door, along with Qin Chuan's figure. Rumble! After an unknown amount of time, a thunderous sound exploded in Qin Chuan's ears, awakening Qin Chuan's slumbering consciousness. His body was like a piece of dead wood floating on the surface of the sea, drifting with the wave. When Qin Chuan woke up and saw the vast ocean below him, Qin Chuan was completely stunned. It was an endless sea made up of countless golden runes. At this moment, it was as if a star had exploded in Qin Chuan's mind. A series of information surged into his mind like an unending wave. Under the impact of this massive amount of information, Qin Chuan fainted on the spot. The sea of runes surging under Qin Chuan's body turned into a trickle at this moment, pouring into Qin Chuan's body. It was like the world's top nutrient fluid nourishing Qin Chuan's limbs and bones. Chapter 3. Boom! A thunderous sound exploded in Qin Chuan's brain, awakening him from his slumbering state of consciousness. A complex and mysterious rune floated quietly in his brain, its structure resembling a thunderbolt that fell from the heavens, exuding an unfathomable power that made one's heart palpitate. The sound of thunder just now came from this rune. Qin Chuan could feel the power of the rune that seemed to be connected to his blood. He could not help but tremble with excitement. Talent rune. He had actually activated his own talent rune. The so-called talent rune was a sign that a person had embarked on the path of cultivation. Only by activating the talent rune could one rely on the power of the rune to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and officially begin cultivation. To put it simply, only those who had activated their talent rune were qualified to become a true cultivator. Those who had not activated their talent rune would never be able to embark on the path of cultivation. Most people would only be able to activate their talent rune after entering university with the help of university tutors. Very few people could activate their talent rune in high school. Those who could activate their talent rune in high school were all 1 in a million geniuses. Take the state capital's second high school of Qing as an example. Currently, there were only 4 people who had activated their talent rune, and all of them had powerful backgrounds. Otherwise, they would not have been able to activate their talent rune earlier than their peers. And now, Qin Chuan had become the 5th person to activate his talent rune in the state capital's second high school of Qing. Activating his talent rune meant that Qin Chuan had the qualifications to cultivate. He had already taken one step into the door of becoming a cultivator. As long as he could obtain a cultivation technique, he would be able to become a cultivator in the qi refining stage in a short period of time. When Qin Chuan thought of the cultivation technique, the thunderous talent rune suddenly surged with a majestic force, turning into countless words that flickered with azure lightning. They were deeply imprinted in Qin Chuan's brain. Thunder-devouring incantation. This is a cultivation technique? Qin Chuan's eyes widened in shock. He could not believe that not only had he activated his talent rune, but he had also obtained a cultivation technique. While Qin Chuan was still in shock, a series of knocks came from downstairs. Hearing the knocks, Qin Chuan's thoughts were instantly pulled back to reality. He subconsciously looked in the direction of the door. What he saw was the floor of the cultivation room, but what appeared in Qin Chuan's mind was the image of a young girl in a white dress standing outside the door. Not only the young girl, but all the furnishings in the room on the first floor, the shabby sofa, the half-broken coffee table, and the dirty gray-furred rat hiding in the corner, appeared clearly in Qin Chuan's mind as if he had seen everything with his own eyes. Everything within a 10-meter radius was within Qin Chuan's perception. Is this the power of perception? Qin Chuan was a little uncertain because he had never had such an experience. As far as he knew, perception could only be obtained when one's brain was developed to 50% or more. However, his brain was only developed to 25%, which was less than half. Just as Qin Chuan was frowning and thinking about these questions, there was another series of knocks on the door downstairs, accompanied by a slightly cold shout. "Qin Chuan, are you at home or not?" Hearing the shouts from outside the door, Qin Chuan hurriedly got up and walked downstairs. Only when he moved did Qin Chuan discover that his body was covered in jet-black mud, emitting a nauseating stench, causing Qin Chuan to subconsciously furrow his brows. Clang! Accompanied by a series of knocks on the door, Qin Chuan's seriously aged smart security door fell to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. Qin Chuan glanced at the fallen door, then looked at the girl who slowly walked in. He pursed his lips and said, "Why are you here? Why am I here? If I don't come, what are you going to do to yourself?" The girl looked at the filthy Qin Chuan with disgust and said coldly, "I've said it before, we're not from the same world. Even if you lock yourself up at home for 3 days and 3 nights and don't go out or go to school, you won't be able to change this fact. You'd better give up." The girl who came to the door was none other than Wang Wenxue, who had broken off her relationship with Qin Chuan on the school's rooftop. She thought that the matter was over, but she didn't expect Qin Chuan to not appear at school for 3 days after that day. She couldn't even find Qin Chuan at his usual place of work. Because she was worried that Qin Chuan would take things too hard and do something stupid, Wang Wenxue had no choice but to come to the door. This wasn't because Wang Wenxue was worried about Qin Chuan's safety. She just didn't want to ruin her reputation because of Qin Chuan's death. Hearing Wang Wenxue's words, Qin Chuan looked at the old electronic watch hanging on the wall with some surprise. It was now 2 o'clock in the afternoon on December 5th. He remembered that it was 6 o'clock in the evening on December 2nd when he returned home. In other words, he had just stayed in the cultivation room for 3 whole days. When he noticed the passage of time, Qin Chuan's stomach suddenly burst with an incomparable feeling of hunger. His whole stomach seemed to be burning, and his originally normal body suddenly became weak. At this moment, Qin Chuan's mind only had one word: eat. Qin Chuan's eyes turned red. He suddenly rushed to the refrigerator not far away and took out a large pile of bread and fast food meat. He didn't care about anything else and devoured it in big mouthfuls like a reincarnated hungry ghost. He was incomparably crazy. Wang Wenxue stared at Qin Chuan, who was sitting on the ground and burying his head in the food. She breathed in the nauseating stench emitting from Qin Chuan's body and felt even more disgusted by Qin Chuan. She was right, Qin Chuan was using her life to threaten her. Otherwise, why would Qin Chuan starve himself to this extent? "What do you want to let me go?" Faced with Wang Wenxue's question, Qin Chuan acted as if he didn't hear it. He only cared about eating. His dirty hands casually wiped them on the tablecloth at the side, grabbed a piece of artificial meat and stuffed it into his mouth. His mouth was full of oil. Looking at Qin Chuan's sloppy appearance, Wang Wenxue's patience was quickly exhausted. With a gloomy face, she said to Qin Chuan, "I will return all the cultivation resources that I borrowed from you. In the future, we will have nothing to do with each other. Whether you live or die, it has nothing to do with me." After leaving these heartless words, without waiting for Qinchuan's response, Wang Wenxue turned around and left. It was as if she couldn't stay in this place for a second longer. She hated the sour smell that belonged to the slums. Chapter 4. Burp. Qinchuan laid on the ground and let out a comfortable burp. He swallowed all the food in the fridge and finally eliminated the feeling of hunger. He felt alive again. He didn't know why he was suddenly so hungry, but he could clearly feel that after filling his stomach, his body gradually surged with an endless amount of energy. It was an experience he had never experienced before. The smell of the food and the stench on his body mixed together and attacked Qinchuan's respiratory system. Qinchuan had no choice but to get up from the ground and rush into the bathroom. After an hour of washing, he finally cleaned off the dirt on his body. A tall and straight body appeared under the water. After drying his body, Qinchuan stood in front of the mirror. He looked at the clear lines of his muscles and felt the explosive power contained in them. He finally confirmed a fact in his heart. He was no longer the trash that everyone laughed at. He became stronger in one night in 3 days. And the cause of all this was the bronze box that he had almost sold off. Thinking of the bronze box, Qinchuan didn't even bother to put on his clothes. He put on a bath towel and went to the cultivation room on the 2nd floor. The bronze box that was originally placed next to the praying mat had disappeared. In its place was an ordinary bronze ring. Looking at the bronze ring on the ground, Qinchuan knew that the appearance of this ring must be related to the bronze box. Perhaps it was another form of the bronze box. Thinking of this, Qinchuan carefully put the bronze ring on his left pinky finger. The size was just right. Although the bronze ring didn't show any magical aspects, Qinchuan had already decided to keep the existence of this bronze ring as his biggest secret. He definitely wouldn't tell a second person. Qinchuan put on his clothes and sat down on the praying mat again. He began to carefully feel every inch of change in his body. The feeling of knowing his body like the back of his hand made Qinchuan very sure that his brain had been greatly developed in these 3 days. As for how much it had been developed, he didn't know for the time being, but it definitely wouldn't be less than 50%. What Qinchuan cared about the most was the activation of the talent rune and the cultivation method called Thunder Devouring Art. Activating the Thunder Attribute Talent Rune and obtaining a Thunder Attribute Cultivation Method at the same time, Qinchuan felt that all of this wasn't an accident. It was an opportunity that fell from the heavens, a fortuitous encounter. Without any hesitation, Qinchuan began the first cultivation in his life according to the chants recorded in the Thunder Devouring Art. Heaven, earth, black, yellow, origin of all spirits, cultivate my lightning mantra, prove my divine ability. As Qinchuan began to cultivate, a faint roar of thunder rang out from his body. Immediately after, an extremely fine blue electric current appeared on the surface of Qinchuan's body, lingering around Qinchuan's body, sometimes dissipating, sometimes regenerating, the cycle repeated endlessly. After Qinchuan circulated the cultivation technique according to the chant, he stopped. A thoughtful look appeared on his face. If he wanted to cultivate the thunder-devouring art, just meditating wasn't enough. He also needed to borrow the power of lightning. Thunder-devouring, 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 thunder. Devouring thunder, devouring thunder, devouring thunder, devouring thunder, devouring thunder. Devouring thunder, 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 devouring. If he could not use the power of lightning to cultivate, it would take him at least 2 years to reach the first level of the thunder-devouring art. Just as Qin was thinking about how to cultivate the thunder-devouring art, his mobile phone suddenly rang. The caller was Old Sun, the boss of the Rune shop where Qin usually worked part-time. As soon as Qin picked up the phone, a roar came from the other side, deafening Qin's ears. "Brat, you're finally willing to pick up the phone? Where the hell have you been these 3 days? The shop is so busy. You just received last month's salary and you're already planning to run away, aren't you? Believe it or not, I'll go to your school and catch you back to work." Hearing Old Sun's roar, Qin grinned. "I'm going to the shop right now. I'll be there soon." Without waiting for Old Sun to say anything, Qin hung up the phone first. Although cultivation was important, he could not neglect the matter of working. If he really angered Old Sun, he would not be able to find such an easy and suitable job. Thinking of this, Qin immediately got up and walked downstairs. When he saw the door lying on the ground, Qin could not help but be stunned. At this time, he recalled that Wang Wenxue had come to look for him this afternoon. Thinking of what Wang Wenxue had said to him before, Qin could not help but reveal a faint smile on his face. "Maybe you're right. We really don't belong to the same world." Old Sun's Rune shop was located in the new development zone of Qingzhou Prefecture. The location was good. It specialized in selling all kinds of cultivation resources for meditation runes. At the same time, it also took care of repairing various kinds of magic tools. The business was very hot. Qin's job in the shop was to help customers buy cultivation resources. As for the more high-end work of repairing magic tools, he did not know how to do it. When Qin rushed to the shop, Old Sun was taking care of the business. When he saw Qin enter, his originally smiling face immediately fell. He scolded Qin in a bad mood. "Brat, hurry up and take care of the customers. I'm going to repair the magic tools." Qin smiled and took over Old Sun's work. He enthusiastically introduced all kinds of cultivation resources to the customers. After 5 minutes, he sent away the satisfied customers and finally had time to look at Old Sun, who was sitting inside and frowning at a magic tool that looked like a watch. Usually, when there were no customers, Qin liked to stand beside Old Sun and watch him repair the magic tools. Although he did not understand anything, he liked that feeling very much. This time was no exception. He stood beside Old Sun and prepared to watch him repair the magic tools. Looking at the watch magic tool in Old Sun's hand, Qin smiled and said casually, "The owner of this watch is too careless. He actually broke the bull array on the watch. It will take a lot of effort to repair it." When Old Sun, who was concentrating on studying the watch, heard Qin's words, he looked back at Qin with some surprise. "Brat, you are not simple. Before, you couldn't even understand the simplest first-level array. Now you can actually recognize this second-level array and see how the watch is broken. I haven't seen you for 3 days and your eyesight has improved. To be honest, have you seen this array before?" Hearing Old Sun's words, Qin could not help but be stunned. When he saw the runes on the watch just now, he subconsciously said the name of the array. But before today, he had never seen the array before. Although his heart was filled with doubts, Qin still replied, "I've seen this watch on a classmate's wrist before. That's why I recognized the bull talisman array. I was wondering why you suddenly had such good eyesight." Old Sun laughed and lowered his head to continue repairing the watch. However, Qin, who was standing beside him, was excited. He could not wait to do an experiment. Chapter 5. Spirit Water Talisman Array, Raging Fire Talisman Array, Strength Talisman Array and this. Level 2 Gale Talisman Array. Qin Chuan stood in front of the counter that stored the damaged magic tools. His gaze swept over the magic tools one by one. Looking at the talisman arrays that were inscribed on the magic tools, he practically didn't even need to think before he could call out the names of these talisman arrays. Not only that, he even had a feeling that he could repair these damaged talisman arrays. One must know that even Old Man Sun, a level 3 weapon refiner, had to flip through the talisman treasured tome in order to recognize these talisman arrays. However, he was able to recognize them with a single glance. Could it be that this fortuitous encounter not only helped me activate my innate talisman and gave me a cultivation technique, it even gave me the possibility of becoming a talisman array master? In the Star Dragon Federation, cultivators were revered, and talisman array masters had the highest status among cultivators. Every talisman array master was an honored guest of various powers, and no one dared to rashly offend them. Unfortunately, in order to become a talisman array master, not only did one need talent, one also needed enormous financial support. Thus, it was possible for one to become a talisman array master out of 10,000 cultivators. From this, one could see the scarcity and preciousness of talisman array masters. Take the state capital of Qing as an example. In the state capital of Qing, which had a population of 20 million, there were approximately 3,000 cultivators. However, among these 3,000 cultivators, there were only 2 talisman array masters. Among the several 100,000 high school students, there were absolutely no more than 100 people who had the potential to become a talisman array master. In the future, there might not even be 10 people who could truly become a talisman array master. Moreover, even those genius figures in the talisman array master Dao, who were known to have limitless potential, might not have the same eyesight as Qin Chuan. "I'm going to be rich." Qin Chuan let out a long sigh of relief. He didn't get carried away by his excitement because he possessed the potential to become a talisman array master. This was because he was extremely clear in his heart that possessing the potential to become a talisman array master didn't mean that he would definitely become a talisman array master. If he truly thought of it this way, then he would be gravely mistaken. In this world, there were too many talisman array geniuses who had fallen on the road to become a talisman array master for all sorts of reasons. He was a poor kid with no financial resources and no teacher. Wanting to become a talisman array master would be far more difficult than ordinary people. There were some things that required money. Money. "What are you standing there for?" Old Man Sun was standing behind Qin Chuan. He handed a blue suitcase to Qin Chuan and said, "This is Mr. Zhou's magic tool. It has been repaired. You can send it over." Delivering repaired celestial devices to customers was also one of Qin Chuan's jobs, and it was also his main job. Now that he had work to do, Qin Chuan had to temporarily suppress his curiosity about talisman arrays. He stretched out his hand to take the suitcase from Old Sun's hand and walked out quickly. When Qin Chuan arrived at the school, it happened to be the end of the school day. A large number of students poured out of the school, blocking the school gate. Qin Chuan was not in a hurry when he saw this. He walked to the side and leaned against the wall. He was prepared to wait until almost all the students in the school had left before going in. If it was in the past, no one would pay attention to Qin Chuan, this trash student from the common class. However, today was a little special. After those students came out of the school and saw Qin Chuan standing against the wall, each and every one of them had a strange look in their eyes. "He is Qin Chuan? That trash from the common class? That's him, a toad who wants to eat swan meat, pestering goddess Xue endlessly. Is he qualified to compete with Lu Qing? Lu Qing is a genius of the important class. What is he? He is overestimating himself." These people stood near Qin Chuan and pointed at Qin Chuan. They were quite unscrupulous and did not put Qin Chuan in their eyes at all. Qin Chuan listened to the surrounding people talking about him and could not help but frown. At this moment, a fat figure rushed in front of Qin Chuan at an extremely fast speed. He anxiously rushed to Qin Chuan and said, "Why are you at the school now? Come with me quickly." This fat man was called Wang Bo. He was Qin Chuan's best friend in school. He was also a student of the common class. He was usually laughing and joking around without any seriousness. This was the first time that Qin Chuan saw such an anxious expression on his face. "Why are we going? I still have work to do." Qin Chuan waved the suitcase in his hand and said, "This belongs to the black-faced god, Old Zhou. If I don't deliver it to him on time, do you believe that he will twist my head off?" Wang Bo did not care about this. He pulled Qin Chuan's arm and was about to leave. "Old Zhou wants to twist your head off, but if you don't leave now, the consequences will be more serious than offending Old Zhou." Hearing Wang Bo speak so seriously, Qin Chuan could not help but raise his eyebrows and asked, "Is it because of Wang Wenxue or because of Lu Cheng?" Although Qin Chuan's grades were not good before, this did not mean that he was brainless. Thinking of the nearby people talking about him, and seeing how Wang Bo wanted him to leave the school in such a hurry, if he still could not guess that someone was looking for trouble with him, then he would have lived these years in vain. "You know that Lu Cheng is looking for trouble with you, yet you still dare to come to school?" Wang Bo rolled his eyes. In the past, he really did not know that this brother of his had the ability to secretly hook up with Wang Wenxue, the goddess of the elite class. However, now was not the time to sigh about this. It was better to slip away first. Just as Wang Bo was about to pull Qin Chuan away, a cold voice suddenly sounded behind Qin Chuan and Wang Bo. "You are Qin Chuan?" The person who spoke was tall and handsome. He was wearing the school uniform that was tailor-made for the geniuses of the elite class. A pair of black and white eyes looked at Qin Chuan with disdain, full of arrogance and prejudice. Qin Chuan turned to look at the person who spoke and slightly frowned. "I am Qin Chuan. Who are you?" "Brother, you are finished. This is Ma Zhen, Lu Cheng's little brother in the elite class." Qin Chuan did not recognize Ma Zhen, but Wang Bo knew Ma Zhen very well. This Ma Zhen was a student of the elite class and was very famous in the school. However, it was not because of his grades, but because of his fierceness. Ma Zhen was arrogant and despotic. Relying on his status as a genius of the elite class, he considered everyone else beneath him. Once a student outside of the elite class accidentally provoked him, he would definitely break that person's legs as revenge. To date, there were at least 30 people who had their legs broken by Ma Zhen. Many of them had their futures ruined. However, because of Lu Cheng's protection, Ma Zhen was able to escape the school's sanctions time and time again. Because of this, no one dared to provoke Ma Zhen anymore. Everyone who saw him had to respectfully call him Brother Zhen. It was very clear that Ma Zhen was eyeing Qin Chuan at this time because of Lu Cheng. Ma Zhen stared fiercely at Chen Tang and said in a gloomy voice, "You don't need to know who I am. All you need to know is that you won't be able to walk out of school today. Your legs are mine." Chapter 6. Your legs, I want them. Ma Zhen's ferocious declaration instantly silenced the noisy campus entrance. All the students who hadn't left couldn't help but look towards the direction of the voice. When they saw the figure of Ma Zhen, everyone's eyes couldn't help but reveal 3 parts reverence and 7 parts curiosity. Which blind fellow had provoked Ma Zhen, this ferocious man? Very quickly, everyone followed Ma Zhen's gaze and found Qin Chuan. When they saw that Qin Chuan was wearing the common class uniform that had been washed until it was white, everyone couldn't help but look at Qin Chuan with pity. Even the students of the important class and the elite class didn't dare to provoke Ma Zhen. You, a mere common class student, actually dared to provoke Ma Zhen? You really are tired of living. Others felt that Qin Chuan was tired of living, but Qin Chuan felt that Ma Zhen had nothing better to do. His gaze was slightly curious as he looked Ma Zhen up and down. With a puzzled tone he asked, Looks like your family background isn't bad. Being able to enter the important class, your talent shouldn't be bad. Why don't you study well and instead like to be someone's dog? Wang Bo, who was standing beside Qin Chuan, was still scratching his ears and cheeks, thinking about how to help Qin Chuan get out of this predicament and smoothly slip away from Ma Zhen's hands. In the end, he heard Qin Chuan's words. He turned his head to look at Qin Chuan, dumbstruck. Brother, you're holding a lantern in the toilet, looking for death. Ma Zhen stared blankly for a moment, then quickly smiled. The smile on his face was very strange. It was as gloomy as a dark cloud, as if a thunderstorm would descend at any time. How interesting. It's been a long time since someone dared to provoke me like this. Ma Zhen's gaze gradually sharpened as he stared at Qin Chuan. He coldly snorted, since you're bent on seeking death, then I'll fulfill your wish. Before he finished speaking, Ma Zhen had already made his move. He pulled out a special baseball bat from his backpack and fiercely swung it towards Qin Chuan's knee with incomparable ferocity. In the crowd, when the timid students saw this scene, they subconsciously closed their eyes, afraid of seeing a bloody scene. However, what made them feel strange was that the expected scream didn't sound. After a moment of hesitation, the timid students opened their eyes to look at Ma Zhen and Qin Chuan. When they saw the scene clearly, they were stunned. Ma Zhen's baseball bat had actually fallen into Qin Chuan's hands. What was this situation? The timid students looked around at their classmates in confusion and found that everyone's eyes were wide open, as if they had seen something unbelievable. He actually snatched the baseball bat from Ma Zhen's hands? Am I seeing things as? This TSSDS, the ZSST, TTS Ma Zhen, the infamous fierce of the elite class, was actually disarmed by a student from the common class. How was this possible? But the truth was right in front of their eyes. They couldn't question it. Others didn't expect such a thing to happen. Ma Zhen, who was at the center of the incident, also didn't expect it. He looked at the baseball bat that Qin Chuan was fiddling with a stunned and bewildered expression. He didn't understand what had just happened. With his strength and speed, how could a piece of trash, who was ranked at the bottom of the common class, be able to disarm him? Qin Chuan looked at the bewildered expression on Ma Zhen's face. He was also a little confused in his heart. When faced with Ma Zhen's ferocious attack, he only subconsciously made the decision to snatch the baseball bat. He completely didn't expect that he would actually succeed. How did I do it just now? Qin Chuan couldn't figure it out. He simply stretched out his hand and stuffed the baseball bat back into Ma Zhen's arms. Again. Ma Zhen looked at the baseball bat that Qin Chuan forcefully stuffed into his arms. He was completely stupefied. The surrounding students who saw this scene were also stupefied. What was this student from the common class trying to do? Soon, Ma Zhen came back to his senses. He glared at Qin Chuan with anger and shame. Are you humiliating me? Qin Chuan frowned slightly. I'm not humiliating you. Hurry up and do it again. Qin Chuan's impatient expression made Ma Zhen furious. He, a genius from the elite class, was actually being disdained by a common class student. However, Qin Chuan didn't think too much about it. He only wanted to try the feeling of being disarmed again. But in Ma Zhen's eyes, Qin Chuan was humiliating him. A trash from the common class wanted to step on him, a genius from the elite class, to climb up. You think you're worthy? In the midst of his angry roar, Ma Zhen held the baseball bat in his hand and displayed all of his strength and speed. The baseball bat cut through the air, leaving behind afterimages. In the midst of the whistling wind, it blasted towards Qin Chuan's right knee like lightning. Pa! A crisp sound rang out. However, it wasn't the sound of the baseball bat hitting the knee. It was the sound of a palm clenching the wrist. Ma Zhen's angry strike was intercepted by Qin Chuan halfway. He grabbed the wrist and was forced to stop. Too slow. The speed at which Ma Zhen swung the baseball bat was too slow. With just a glance, Qin Chuan saw through Ma Zhen's intention to attack. He also predicted the next movement of Ma Zhen's swinging arm. That was why he could accurately attack, lock onto Ma Zhen's wrist, and forcibly stop Ma Zhen's attack. Was this still the same genius from the elite class that he once had to look up to? You're just SOSO. The corner of Qin Chuan's mouth raised into a confident smile. Then, he bent his waist and lowered his shoulders. His left hand clenched into a fist, and he brazenly attacked. With the force of a thunderbolt, he attacked Ma Zhen's abdomen. A strong force poured out from the tip of his fist. It was like a river bursting its banks. In an instant, Ma Zhen, who was still in shock, was defeated. Ow ow ow! The intense pain caused Ma Zhen to wail out loud. Snot and tears flowed out of his nose. His legs gave way and he knelt on the ground with a plop. His hands clutched his abdomen tightly, and his whole body trembled uncontrollably. Near the school gate, everyone was so shocked that their eyes widened. They stared at Qin Chuan with an extremely horrified gaze. It was as if they had seen an incredible monster. They couldn't believe that Ma Zhen, who had been flaunting his prowess in school for more than 2 years, had been defeated just like that. This was fierce man Ma Zhen. This was the genius of the elite class. You're just a student from the ordinary class. What right did you have? In other people's eyes, this was a very amazing thing. However, in Qin Chuan's eyes, this was nothing. He lowered his head and looked at the old electronic watch on his wrist. Then, he said to his best friend Wang Bo, who was already stunned, "You wait for me here. I'll be back soon." After saying that, Qin Chuan picked up his suitcase from the ground and quickly walked towards the school gate. As for Ma Zhen, who was still kneeling on the ground, he was just a lackey. He wasn't worth paying attention to. Chapter 7. The high-spirited Qin Chuan was now standing in front of the head of teaching, Zhou Meng. He was as obedient as a quail, smiling apologetically. He had no choice. According to the rules, he had to deliver the items to Zhou Meng before 5 p.m. However, when he arrived at Zhou Meng's office, it was already 5:10 p.m. He was late by a full 10 minutes. Facing Zhou Meng, the black-face god, he was in the wrong. Naturally, his expression was a little awkward. Zhou Meng was the head teacher of the 3rd year. He had the responsibility to manage all the teachers and students in the 3rd year. Qin Chuan was naturally under Zhou Meng's jurisdiction. It could be said that he understood Zhou Meng quite well. The reason why this person was called the black-faced god was not only because of his black face, but also because of his bad temper. Most importantly, he especially hated people who were late and had no concept of time. Qin Chuan was late this time. It could be said that Zhou Meng had completely taken advantage of Qin Chuan. He still had a long time in school in the future. It was inevitable that Zhou Meng would make things difficult for him. Although the head of teaching might not care about him, a student from the common class, it was impossible for him not to worry at all. At this time, Qin Chuan had already cursed Ma Zhen 108,000 times in his heart. If it wasn't for this guy who suddenly jumped out to block the way, how could he be late? Just as Qin Chuan was cursing Ma Zhen in his heart, Zhou Meng suddenly opened his mouth and asked, "Why are you late?" Zhou Meng's voice was low and hoarse. It was said that his vocal cords were injured on the battlefield. Therefore, his voice became a little gloomy, which made people feel uncomfortable listening to it. Qin Chuan grinned and said, "There was a traffic jam on the road, so I was late. However, I guarantee that there won't be a next time." Hearing Qin Chuan's explanation, Zhou Meng snorted coldly. Without saying a word, he stretched out his hand and drew a line in the air. A holographic projection screen appeared in front of Qin Chuan. The video playing on it was the scene of Qin Chuan and Ma Zhen fighting at the school gate. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan felt like he was suffering in silence. This was the first time he had lied in front of He Mianchen, and he was exposed on the spot. His luck was too bad. Qin Chuan thought black-faced God would scold him, but he did not expect a smile to appear on black-faced God's face. Although it was faint, it was very real. The black-faced God could actually smile? Qin Chuan was shocked, but he did not dare to show any doubt on his face. He had been in the school for nearly 3 years and had seen He Mianxian many times, but he had never seen He Mianxian smile. Although Ma Zhen is at the bottom of the important class, he still has some strength. You were able to defeat Ma Zhen so easily. Not bad. Zhou Meng looked at Qin Chuan with faint admiration. He seemed to be very satisfied with Qin Chuan beating up Ma Zhen. Qin Chuan was really surprised this time. He Mianxian did not scold him for fighting, but praised him for doing well. Could it be that Ma Zhen was too arrogant and had offended He Mianxian before, so He Mianxian was very happy to see him teach Ma Zhen a lesson today? Zhou Meng did not know what Qin Chuan was thinking, but even if he knew, he would not care too much. He looked at Qin Chuan and said, "You return the baseball bat to Ma Zhen and let him beat you again because you did not know how you disarmed Ma Zhen the first time, right?" "Yes." This time, Qin Chuan answered Zhou Meng honestly. Until now, he was still confused. He really did not understand how he did it. "This is the suppression of the brain," Zhou Meng calmly explained to Qin Chuan. "Your brain development far exceeds Ma Zhen's. Therefore, when Ma Zhen makes a move, you can use your advantage in brain development to predict Ma Zhen's intention and make the appropriate response from there. The reason why you do not know how you did it is because your brain was not developed that much. Later on, due to some special reasons, your brain's development skyrocketed. In addition, you did not have time to adapt to the sudden emergence of a powerful force, so what happened earlier happened. You know how it happened, but you do not know why it happened. So, you must have had some kind of adventure in the past few days." Listening to Zhou Meng's explanation, Qin Chuan subconsciously nodded. His face revealed an expression of sudden realization. However, when he heard Zhou Meng's last sentence, Qin Chuan could not help but change his expression. His gaze turned cold as he looked at Zhou Meng. Seeing Qin Chuan's vigilance, Zhou Meng was not angry. Instead, he was very satisfied. He nodded lightly and said, "I am not interested in the adventure that happened to you. I am only saying this to remind you that the matter of you defeating Ma Zhen today will definitely attract the attention of some people. They will definitely investigate you and beat around the bush to find out what happened to you. You can't possibly think that it is easy for a student from the normal class to defeat a genius from the elite class, right? You have to be careful and protect your privacy. Your strength is still too weak right now. There are some people you cannot stop. I am very satisfied to see that you are not complacent just because you have had some adventure. You do not know the immensity of heaven and earth." Hearing Zhou Meng's explanation and seeing the sincere expression on Zhou Meng's face, Qin Chuan knew in his heart that Zhou Meng was truly not interested in his adventure. While he rejoiced, he also became vigilant in his heart. Zhou Meng was not interested in his adventure, but this did not mean that others were not interested in his adventure. In the future, he would have to constantly be on guard against all kinds of probing around him. If he was careless and gave himself away, when the time came, he really would not be able to stop them. "Let's go. Let's test your current level of brain development." Zhou Meng stood up. With a wave of his hand, the wall behind him became transparent, revealing a cultivation room with a radius of over 100 square meters. This was the place where Zhou Meng usually cultivated in seclusion. Very few people had ever entered this place. Looking at the luxurious cultivation room that suddenly appeared in front of him, Qin Chuan's eyes could not help but reveal a hint of envy. Compared to the real cultivation room in front of him, his so-called cultivation room could not even be compared to a dog's kennel. Qin Chuan clenched his fists tightly. He would definitely have a cultivation room like this in the future, or even better. If you want to suppress your opponent in terms of brain development, you have to have at least 5% more brain development than your opponent. Mahjong's brain development is 55%. In other words, your brain development needs to be at least 60%. As Zhou Meng spoke, he turned to look at Qin Chuan. But in the records, your brain development is only 25%. I am really very curious. What kind of amazing adventure did you encounter to allow your brain development to soar to such a level? You should know that even Lu Cheng from the elite class only has a brain development of 68%. Chapter 8. Zhou Meng wasn't the only one who was curious. Qin Chuan was also very curious about the extent of his brain development. If it had been in the past, Qin Chuan would have been very envious when someone said that Lu Cheng's brain development was 68%. But now, he was confident that he could achieve the same level, or even surpass Lu Cheng. Therefore, when Zhou Meng mentioned Lu Cheng, Qin Chuan wasn't envious. Instead, he was competitive and secretly vowed to surpass Lu Cheng. When Zhou Meng mentioned Lu Cheng, he had been observing the changes in Qin Chuan's expression. When he saw the confidence on Qin Chuan's face, he couldn't help but nod slightly. In his heart, he liked and approved of Qin Chuan even more. He had seen too many commoner geniuses. He had also seen too many commoner geniuses groveling in front of aristocratic families for a little bit of cultivation resources. He didn't want Qin Chuan to follow in the footsteps of those commoner geniuses and become a lackey of aristocratic families. While Zhou Meng was thinking about these things, Qin Chuan was like Granny Lu entering the Grandview Garden. His eyes were constantly looking around the cultivation room. He was very curious and yearning for everything. That's the rumored high-class resting cabin. It's said that sleeping in there for an hour is equivalent to sleeping outside for 3 hours. If I sleep in there every day, I can save a lot of time for cultivation. Is that a gravity cabin? It's said that it can freely adjust the gravity up to 20 times the normal gravity. If I can adapt to 20 times the gravity and return to normal, my speed and strength will be very exaggerated. Qin Chuan recognized every piece of equipment in the cultivation room. However, he had only seen them on the internet before. Today was the first time he saw the real thing. His mind couldn't help but fly to these equipment, and his eyes couldn't move away. If he had such a cultivation room now, he would probably wake up laughing in his dreams. Seeing the undisguised envy and yearning on Qin Chuan's face, Zhou Meng's tan face couldn't help but reveal a look of reminiscence. When he first saw such a cultivation room, his expression was almost exactly the same as Qin Chuan's. His heart was full of envy and yearning, but now that he had such conditions, he rarely went to cultivate. With the passage of time, everything was different from before. Stop looking at it first. You're drooling. Looking at Qin Chuan now, Zhou Meng felt like he was looking at his younger self. He couldn't be serious anymore. He pursed his lips and said to Qin Chuan, "If your brain development can reach a level that I'm satisfied with, I'll allow you to cultivate in my cultivation room for 1 day every week." In fact, Zhou Meng could allow Qin Chuan to cultivate in his cultivation room at any time. However, that might not be a good thing for Qin Chuan. He wanted to let Qin Chuan yearn and look forward to the cultivation room at all times. Only then could he better motivate Qin Chuan to cultivate diligently and cherish this rare opportunity. Hearing Zhou Meng's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but widen his eyes. He looked at Zhou Meng in disbelief and exclaimed, "Really? I can really cultivate here? You're only allowed 1 day a week." Zhou Meng raised a finger. "Also, the degree of development of your brain must at least satisfy me." Hearing Zhou Meng's answer, Qin Chuan immediately roared in excitement. He waved his fist and said, "I'll definitely satisfy you. Not to mention cultivating in this cultivation room for 1 day a week, even if it was only for 1 hour a week, Qin Chuan would still do his best." To Qin Chuan, who thirsted for strength, This environment was simply heaven. Zhou Meng was very pleased with Qinchuan's ecstasy. He reached out and patted Qinchuan's shoulder affectionately. Let's go and do the test. Under Zhou Meng's guidance, Qinchuan arrived in front of a silver-white cabin. This was a test cabin specially used to test the development of the brain. It was more advanced than the normal test cabins in the school, and it was also more accurate. It was almost impossible to make any mistakes. Let's go in. Qinchuan had already done many tests, so he didn't need Zhou Meng's guidance. He sat in the cabin and adjusted himself to a more comfortable position. He closed his eyes slightly and began to meditate. Zhou Meng stood outside the cabin and looked at Qinchuan with anticipation. He really hoped that Qinchuan could bring him some special surprises. When some clouds gradually appeared in the test cabin, it meant that the test had begun. The thicker the clouds, the higher the level of brain development. When Qinchuan was being tested in the past, only 2 or 3 clouds would appear in the test cabin. It was very cold and cheerless. However, it was different this time. Qinchuan's entire body was almost hidden in the clouds. His figure was hazy and vaguely visible. Seeing the reaction of the test cabin, Zhou Meng couldn't help but feel satisfied. The longer he interacted with Qinchuan, the more satisfied he was with Qinchuan. With such a thick cloud, the brain development had definitely reached 60%. It was no different from what he had expected. Just as Zhou Meng nodded in satisfaction, a flash of lightning suddenly appeared in the clouds. Zhou Meng's body trembled and his eyes widened. The test process was very short, only about 5 minutes. However, Qinchuan felt as if he had slept. When he woke up, he felt refreshed and couldn't help but stretch. After stretching, Qinchuan opened his eyes and saw the infinitely enlarged dark face in front of him. He was so shocked that he almost jumped out of the test cabin. "Director, what are you doing?" Qinchuan was shocked by Zhou Meng's dark face. He hurriedly got up and walked out of the test cabin. Facing Zhou Meng's scorching gaze, Qinchuan felt a little uncomfortable. This black mask god's attitude towards me was so good. Could it be that he has some weird fetish? Just as Qinchuan was letting his imagination run wild, Zhou Meng took a deep breath and calmed down. "Your brain development is pretty good. It's at 64%, far exceeding my expectations. However, this isn't the key. The key is that flash of lightning." Zhou Meng looked at Qinchuan with an extremely amazed gaze. "You actually activated your talent rune." When Qinchuan heard this, he glanced at Zhou Meng in surprise. "That's right. Can't I?" Hearing Qinchuan's words, Zhou Meng suddenly laughed. "Yes, of course it's possible. Why not? If anyone dares to say it's not possible, I'll tear them apart." Qinchuan couldn't help but feel suspicious as he looked at Zhou Meng, who suddenly displayed boundless domineering aura. He had activated his talent rune, but what did that have to do with Zhou Meng? Why was he so happy? Chapter 9. Your talent has really brought me too many surprises. Zhou Meng looked at Qinchuan with admiration. He had not laughed so heartily in a long time. This reminded him of the feeling of winning a battle. There was probably nothing in the world that could make him happier than winning a battle. "As long as you're happy." Qinchuan looked at Zhou Meng with a strange expression. He felt that something was wrong. Zhou Meng's attitude towards him was as good as that of his own son. It was really strange. This was not how the black-faced god should be like. Zhou Meng seemed to have seen through Qinchuan's doubts. He laughed and said, "Do you think that my attitude towards you is very strange? It's not like my usual style." Qinchuan nodded honestly. If he could not figure out what was going on, he was afraid that he would not be able to sleep when he returned home. Zhou Meng sighed and said to Qinchuan in a rather emotional tone, "I've looked into your information. You are an orphan born in the slums. A few decades ago, before I joined the army, I was also an orphan in the slums like you." Qinchuan could not help but open his eyes wide in surprise. He did not expect that Zhou Meng, the black-faced god, was also an orphan in the slums. If Zhou Meng did not lie to him, then he could probably understand why Zhou Meng was so friendly towards him. If he were Zhou Meng, he would probably be naturally close to people who had the same background as him. When he thought of this, Qin Chuan subconsciously relaxed his vigilance against Zhou Meng. The way he looked at Zhou Meng also became somewhat intimate. My background is not a secret. You can definitely find out, so I won't lie to you about such a small matter. I am really gratified to see another genius in the slums. Zhou Meng looked at Qin Chuan with a sincere gaze and said, I hope that you can always persevere on your path. You would rather die than submit. A genius with a high degree of brain development might not be worthy of Zhou Meng's high expectations, but a genius with a high degree of brain development and a talent Rune, especially a commoner, was different. In today's world, most of the resources were controlled by aristocratic families and sections. If the commoners did not rely on these forces, it would be difficult for them to make a name for themselves. Zhou Meng had been the head of teaching for more than 10 years. He had seen too many commoner geniuses rely on aristocratic families because of the lack of cultivation resources. He was heartbroken, but he did not have the ability to change this situation. Therefore, he really hoped that one of the civilians could stand up and change the current situation. Although this hope was very slim, so slim that Zhou Meng almost gave up, fortunately, Qin Chuan appeared at this time and gave him hope again. Almost everything that happened in the school could not escape Zhou Meng's eyes. He knew why Ma Zhen looked for Qin Chuan. He also knew that Qin Chuan and Lu Qing did not have much interaction. However, because of Wang Wenxue, he was sure that there would be a big battle between Qin Chuan and Lu Qing. One was a proud son of heaven from an aristocratic family, and the other was a poor boy from the slums. They were both talented and outstanding. He really could not wait to see some sparks from the friction between these two people. If Qin Chuan could successfully defeat Lu Qing in this battle, then he did not mind giving Qin Chuan a great opportunity. However, it was still too early to talk about this. Everything still depended on Qin Chuan's performance in the future. If Qin Chuan's performance was average and he could not resist Lu Qing's sharpness, then it could only mean that Qin Chuan was not the person he was waiting for. He was not a cold-blooded person, but he was not a person who liked to waste time. A person who could not even defeat Lu Qing was not worthy of his attention, let alone his resources and time to fund. This was very cruel, but this was the reality. Qin Chuan did not know that Zhou Meng had thought so many things in this short period of time. He also did not know that Zhou Meng had regarded him as the fulcrum that had the hope to pry open the huge power of the aristocratic families in the future. In the face of Zhou Meng's expectations and encouragement, he nodded solemnly and said, I will not disappoint your expectations. He was not a person who liked to bow down. Otherwise, when he faced the fierce Ma Zhen at the school gate, he would not have provoked him. Very good. Zhou Meng reached out and patted Qin Chuan's shoulder with gratification. He said, Every Sunday, you can come to my place to practice. I will give you permission. You can use any equipment inside. Don't be afraid of breaking it. Feel free to use it. Well, it's not early today. You should go home. That. Qin Chuan did not leave immediately. Instead, he scratched his head embarrassedly and said, About me being late to deliver the things, you see, according to the rules, if Qin Chuan was late to deliver things, the errand fee would be gone. However, now that he had a good relationship with Zhou Meng should not complain to old man's son about him, right? Zhou Meng heard this and laughed. He said, You can rest assured that I will not complain about you. I will give you a 5-star rating. Thank you, Director. Qin Chuan's eyes suddenly lit up. A 5-star rating could give him 150% of the errand fee. This was a big profit. After sending off the happy Qin Chuan, Zhou Meng took out his mobile phone and looked at the number in the address book that he had not dialed for a long time. After a long silence, he finally called the number. The phone rang for a long time before someone finally picked it up. A low and heavy voice came from the other side. "It's me." These two simple words made Zhou Meng's eyes turn red. Tears could not help but roll in his eyes. "Captain, I'm Zhou Meng." The person on the other side of the phone was silent for a long time. Then, he said, "I'm no longer a captain. Don't call me that." Hearing this depressed voice, Zhou Meng took a deep breath and said, "Captain, I found a genius in the slums. He has a lot of potential and is also that's enough." Before Zhou Meng could finish, the person on the other side of the phone interrupted him. "I've said before that I have given up. Don't mention these things to me in the future." After saying this, the person hung up the phone without waiting for Zhou Meng to speak. When Zhou Meng called again, he was already blacklisted. Looking at the familiar phone number on the phone, Zhou Meng could not help but clench his fist. He gritted his teeth and said, "Captain, this time we will not be disappointed." Chapter 10. For a genius like Ma Zhen, physical wounds were easy to heal, but mental wounds were hard to heal. Qin Chuan had beaten Ma Zhen to the ground in front of hundreds of students at the school gate. This was a huge humiliation for Ma Zhen. This humiliation couldn't be washed away with blood. Wang Wenxue, who heard the news, stood beside the bed and looked at the gloomy Ma Zhen. Her face was also ugly. She didn't expect Ma Zhen to find trouble with Qin Chuan. She also didn't expect Qin Chuan to defeat Ma Zhen. If it wasn't for the fact that many people saw it with their own eyes, Wang Wenxue would have found it hard to believe. How could a bottom feeder from the normal class beat a genius from the elite class? The Qin Chuan she knew definitely didn't have such strength. "Senior Ma, I am responsible for this matter. I am very sorry." Wang Wenxue sincerely apologized to Ma Zhen. Although her talent was better than Ma Zhen's and her strength was stronger, Ma Zhen was close to Lu Qing. As Lu Cheng's girlfriend, she still had to give Ma Zhen some face. When Ma Zhen heard Wang Wenxue apologize to him, he was somewhat disdainful. However, because of Lu Cheng's face, he could only force a smile to Wang Wenxue and said, "This isn't your fault. I was careless and failed miserably. However, there will definitely not be such a thing next time." As he spoke, Ma Zhen's face showed a hint of ruthlessness. Yes, there will be a next time. He wouldn't let Qin Chuan off so easily. Previously, he only wanted to break Qin Chuan's legs as punishment. Now, he wanted to break Qin Chuan's 4 limbs. No, it should be all 5 limbs. Only in this way could he vent his hatred for Qin Chuan. Looking at Ma Zhen's undisguised hatred for Qin Chuan, Wang Wenxue knew that Ma Zhen wouldn't let this go. He would definitely take revenge on Qin Chuan. Thinking of Qin Chuan, Wang Wenxue couldn't help but feel a little angry. How could this guy cause so much trouble? "Senior brother, have a good rest. I'll take my leave first." Wang Wenxue bid farewell to Ma Zhen and turned to leave. Looking at Wang Wenxue's enchanting figure as she left, Ma Zhen couldn't help but sneer and whisper, "She's just young Master Cheng's plaything. She really thinks she's the young madam of the Lu family." Wang Bo's current mood was very complicated and melancholy. It was complicated because he didn't expect that his best friend, whom he had played with since he was a child, would become so strong that he could even defeat Ma Zhen. He was depressed because he knew that with Ma Zhen's personality, after suffering such a huge loss at the hands of Qin Chuan, he would definitely not let the matter rest. When the time came, Qin Chuan would have to face Ma Zhen's storm-like revenge, and it would definitely be difficult for him. As Qin Chuan's best friend, he would definitely be affected and become the fish in the pond that would be implicated. However, Wang Bo didn't intend to escape. As Qin Chuan's best friend, although he couldn't beat people together with Qin Chuan, it wasn't a big problem for him to be beaten up together. "What are you thinking about here?" Qin Chuan walked out of the school gate and saw Wang Bo standing under a tree in a daze. He smiled and said to Wang Bo, "Don't tell me you're in heat and thinking about your goddess?" Wang Bo came back to his senses and looked at the smiling Qin Chuan standing in front of him. He couldn't help but give him a thumbs up and said, "Awesome. Brother, you're really in the limelight this time. We don't even need to wait until tomorrow for the whole school to know that the infamous Ma Zhen of the elite class was defeated by a poor kid from the common class. You're going to be famous." Qin Chuan heard this and grinned, saying, "Then do you want me to bring you along? When people ask, I'll say that the two of us did it together and let you, young Master Wang, become famous in the school." "Don't." Wang Bo heard this and quickly waved his hand, shaking his head like a rattledrum. "I can't take it." Seeing that his best friend Wang Bo didn't avoid him because he provoked Ma Zhen, Qin Chuan was very happy in his heart. He was just saying it and wouldn't really spread it around because it wasn't necessary and wasn't worth it. In the end, Ma Zhen was just a small character. "Let's go, brother, I'll take you to eat skewers." Qin Chuan was happy. Today's errand fee had extra income, enough for the two of them to eat a good dinner. Hearing that Qin Chuan wanted to treat him to a meal, Wang Bo didn't stand on ceremony with Qin Chuan and directly shouted, "I want to eat 2 skewers of kidney to nourish myself. Today I was scared to death by you." Just as Qin Chuan and Wang Bo were about to leave with their arms around each other's shoulders, a tall figure wearing a pleated skirt blocked their path. "Qin Chuan, come with me." Wang Wenxue looked at Qin Chuan with a serious expression. Looking at the sudden appearance of Wang Wenxue, Wang Bo quietly poked Qin Chuan's waist and winked at Qin Chuan. Others might not know the relationship between Qin Chuan and Wang Wenxue, but as Qin Chuan's best friend, he knew it clearly. At this time, Wang Wenxue came to Qin Chuan. Maybe there was something good going on. However, Wang Bo didn't know that Wang Wenxue had already become Lu Cheng's girlfriend, and she had already threatened to cut off all ties with Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan looked at Wang Wenxue, who was standing in front of him. He pursed his lips and asked, "What do you want me to do with you? If it's nothing important, then forget it." "I still want to eat skewers with Wang Bo." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Wang Wenxue immediately frowned and said, "You still have the mood to eat skewers now?" Did he really think that he was invincible after defeating Ma Zhen through trickery? "I'm warning you, the geniuses of the elite class aren't people you can provoke. If you don't want Ma Zhen to take revenge on you, then you better come with me now and apologize to Ma Zhen. As long as your attitude is sincere, I can guarantee that Ma Zhen won't find trouble with you in the future." Looking at Wang Wenxue's righteous and considerate appearance, Qin Chuan didn't feel any warmth or gratitude in his heart. On the contrary, he faintly felt annoyed. He put on a fake smile and said indifferently to Wang Wenxue, "I don't think there's a need to apologize. If he wants to take revenge on me, then let him come. You don't have to care about me, and I don't need you to care about me. We'll go our separate ways, this is what we've agreed on." "You don't know what's good for you." Looking at Qin Chuan's indifferent expression, Wang Wenxue's heart was filled with anger. She originally had good intentions, but she didn't think that Qin Chuan would have such a face. Qin Chuan didn't take Wang Wenxue's anger to heart, and he didn't care at all. This was because the Wang Wenxue in front of him was no longer the Wang Wenxue he knew. That pure, innocent, kind and cute girl in the prime of her youth had long died in his heart. Chapter 11. After eating skewers with his best friend Wang Bo, Qin Chuan didn't go home immediately. Instead, he went to Qingyang Road, which was located on the west side of the city. The day after tomorrow was Sunday. According to the agreement, he could enter Black-Face God Zhou Meng's cultivation room for a day of cultivation. Before that, he needed to be fully prepared. In the past, Qin Chuan's cultivation talent was extremely poor. There wasn't much difference whether he used cultivation resources or not. Therefore, Qin Chuan rarely used cultivation resources and didn't care about cultivation resources. However, it was different now. Not only did Qin Chuan have an outstanding cultivation talent, He also had the opportunity to use a luxurious cultivation room. If he could use cultivation resources in this situation to cultivate, he would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. This time, Qin Chuan came to Qingyang Road for cultivation resources. Qingyang Road looked like an ordinary street from the outside. There was nothing special about it. There were no shops that sold cultivation resources. However, as a regular here, Qin Chuan knew that there was a huge underground city under Qingyang Road. In this underground city, as long as you had money, you could buy anything you wanted. This underground city was called Black City. Black City wasn't a unique feature of the state capital of Qing. It was said that there was such a black city under every city in the entire Star Dragon Federation. No one knew who opened this black city all over the Federation. However, all the regular visitors to Black City knew that those who dared to cause trouble in Black City would definitely not live to see the next morning. Therefore, although Black City was a mix of good and bad people, the order was surprisingly good. In the past 2 years, Qin Chuan would come to Black City once a month to buy cultivation resources for Wang Wenshu. The reason why he didn't go to the regular shops outside was that the price in Black City was cheaper. Now that Qin Chuan wanted to buy cultivation resources for himself, the first place he thought of was naturally Black City. The entrance to Black City was in the backyard of an ordinary grocery store. People who wanted to enter Black City first had to spend money in the grocery store to buy a pass. It wasn't expensive, only 10 yuan. Of course, you could also not buy it. However, once you had an accident in Black City, if you didn't have a pass in your hand, Black City wouldn't protect you. Therefore, no matter what identity a person came to Black City, they would spend money to buy a pass as a peace of mind. Qin Chuan walked into the grocery store with ease. Looking at the boss who was sitting behind the counter, he didn't say anything. He put a 10 yuan federal coin on the counter and then spread his hand on the counter. The originally dark counter suddenly flashed, but soon returned to normal. At this time, Qin Chuan raised his hand again. There was a black crescent moon mark in his palm. This was the pass of Black City. It could last for 24 hours. In other words, during these 24 hours, Qin Chuan was under the protection of Black City. Once Qin Chuan walked out of Black City and left Qingyang Road, this mark would disappear without a trace in less than 10 minutes. It was very magical. After getting the pass, Qin Chuan didn't stay. He went directly to the backyard of the grocery store. He needed to take the direct elevator in the backyard to go to Black City. However, before that, he still needed to do some disguise. Qin Chuan took out a thin black mask from his coat pocket and put it on his face. Only the forehead and a pair of eyes were exposed. Even if Wang Bo was here, he might not be able to recognize who Qin Chuan was. This was the disguise mask that Qin Chuan spent 100 yuan to buy in Black City. It was very common in Black City and not rare. After putting on the mask, Qin Chuan walked into the elevator. At this time, there were a lot of people in the elevator. Most of them were wearing a disguise mask. Even if they didn't wear a disguise mask, they still looked fierce and didn't look easy to provoke. Among them, there was one person who emitted a palpitating spiritual power fluctuation. He seemed to be a real cultivator. Everyone in the elevator tried to stay away from the suspected cultivator as much as possible. They were afraid of getting into trouble. They didn't even dare to look at him. This scene fell into Qin Chuan's eyes, making him feel particularly envious. This was the status of cultivators in people's mind. They were noble and powerful, and no one dared to provoke them. The elevator began to move, carrying the crowd down to the ground at a very fast speed. In just a few breaths, the crowd had descended more than 300 meters. Through the transparent elevator cover, they could clearly see the scenery of Black City. People were coming and going, the lights were bright, lively and prosperous. Qin Chuan, who had been to Black City many times, was somewhat immune to the scenery here. However, there was a faint excitement in his eyes. This time, his purpose was different from the past. He came for himself. This feeling made Qinchuan feel very good. Sure enough, people still have to live for themselves, Qinchuan whispered. After the elevator stopped, he stepped out and went straight to the depths of Black City. As a frequent visitor of Black City, Qinchuan didn't have a complete understanding of the situation in Black City, but at least he was not far from the truth. He was very clear about where the cultivation resources were the best, cheapest, and most cost-effective. Therefore, he didn't have to do any shopping and just went straight to the door. After Qinchuan walked for about 10 minutes in the sea of people, he finally stopped in front of a store called Kelly's Little Store. He glanced at the surrounding pedestrians and then stepped into the store. Small business, no credit allowed. When Qinchuan just entered the door, he heard a lazy voice coming from behind the counter. Looking at the charming lady boss, Kelly, who was sitting behind the counter with one hand supporting her chin, Qinchuan chuckled and said, "You always say such words to the customers. Aren't you afraid that the customers will get angry and not come again?" Hearing the familiar voice, Kelly, who was sitting behind the counter, couldn't help but raise her head in surprise. She looked at Qinchuan, who was walking in, and asked puzzledly, "Brat, don't you only come once a month? Why are you here again this time after a few days? Could it be that you made a fortune?" Qinchuan had been buying cultivation resources from Kelly for more than 2 years. After a while, the two became familiar with each other. Although Qinchuan was wearing a mask and Kelly couldn't see Qinchuan's face, she was still very familiar with Qinchuan's voice. "I didn't make a fortune. This time I'm not here to buy anything." Qinchuan put a black cloth bag on the counter and said to Kelly, "Change these low-level spiritual powder to high-level spiritual powder." Kelly glanced at the cloth bag on the counter and then looked at Qinchuan with a playful look. "Are you sure? Although you bought it from me, you still have to abide by the rules. I'll take 20% of the commission." Chapter 12. In the Black City, the general cultivation resources were very cheap, but the advanced cultivation resources were very expensive. This wasn't because the Black City's bosses were black-hearted, but because the advanced cultivation resources couldn't be bought outside. Outside, almost all the advanced cultivation resources were controlled by the aristocratic families and sections. Even if ordinary people had the money, they couldn't buy it. Under this almost monopolized situation, the advanced cultivation resources circulating in the Black City's market were very precious. Therefore, the high price became a matter of course. Those who wanted to buy the advanced cultivation resources but didn't have the channels could only pinch their noses and accept it. Therefore, when he heard that Kelly wanted to take 20% of the commission, although Qinchuan was very pained, he had no choice but to agree. 20% is fine. Qinchuan glanced at his own cloth bag and said to Kelly, "But don't fool me. Rest assured, you're a regular customer. How can I fool you?" Kelly chuckled and casually picked up the pouch. She didn't mind that it was dirty and simply poured out the spiritual powder on the counter. The light green spiritual powder was divided into dozens of portions and contained in small transparent packets. Each packet contained a standard dosage of 100 grams, which was enough to provide a normal person with the energy required for one session of cultivation. Looking at the spiritual powder on the counter, Kelly smiled and said to Qinchuan, "The exchange rate of low-level spiritual powder for advanced spiritual powder is 100:1. You have a total of 20 bags of 2,000 grams of low-level spiritual powder. That is to say, you can exchange for 200 grams of advanced spiritual powder. After deducting my commission, you can exchange for 160 grams of advanced spiritual powder. Are you sure you want to exchange now?" Hearing Kelly say that his 2,000 grams of low-level spiritual powder could only be exchanged for 160 grams of advanced spiritual powder, Qinchuan's heart was simply dripping blood. But for better cultivation, he could only clench his teeth and endure the pain. "Exchange. Qin Chuan took a deep breath and said, "Exchange all of them for advanced spiritual powder. I like your straightforwardness." Kelly grinned as she glanced at Qin Chuan. Then, with a sweep of her hand, she collected all the low-tier spiritual powders on the table. She then turned around and retrieved 2 small bags of dark green spiritual powders from the storage cabinet behind her. She casually threw them in front of Qin Chuan and said, "These are yours." Qin Chuan looked at the 2 bags of advanced spiritual powder in front of him and was somewhat surprised. "You haven't taken your commission. Just treat it as this old mother is in a good mood today and is giving it to you." Kelly lazily stretched and casually said, "This little bit of advanced spiritual powder is not enough for this old mother." Hearing Kelly's words, Qin Chuan hesitated for a moment. In the end, he reached out and accepted the 2 bags of advanced spiritual powder. Then he said to Kelly very solemnly, "I will repay you." To the current Qin Chuan, advanced cultivation resources were extremely precious. Kelly casually gave him 40 grams of advanced spiritual powder. It could be said that she had helped him a lot. As the saying goes, one does not receive rewards without pains. Since he had received benefits from Kelly, he naturally had to repay her in the future. Kelly completely did not take Qin Chuan's promise to heart. She yawned and said to Qin Chuan, "All right, if there's nothing else, you can leave now." Since he had achieved his goal of exchanging cultivation resources, Qin Chuan naturally had no reason to continue staying here. Just as Qin Chuan was about to turn around and leave, 2 notices posted on the wall attracted Qin Chuan's attention. Qin Chuan subconsciously walked closer to the 2 notices. Looking at the complicated and profound runes on the notices, his heart suddenly trembled. It was actually a talisman array, and a very advanced one at that. Kelly, who was sitting behind the counter, saw that Qin Chuan did not leave and instead walked towards the 2 notices. She couldn't help but lightly raise her eyebrows and remind Qin Chuan, "Kid, be careful. You will get dizzy if you look at this talisman array for too long." Qin Chuan ignored Kelly's warning. His eyes were fixed on the talisman array for a long time. Then he slowly turned his head to look at Kelly and asked with a somewhat excited voice, "Lady Boss, is what's written on the notice real? As long as you can recognize what kind of talisman array this is, you will be given 100,000 yuan. Of course it's real, but you." Kelly suddenly sat up straight and stared sharply at Qin Chuan. She asked, "You recognize that talisman array?" "I don't recognize it." Qin Chuan originally wanted to admit it, but he suddenly recalled Zhou Meng's warning. Thus, he changed his words and said, "But I have an elder who is a talisman array master. He will definitely be able to recognize what this talisman array is." Kelly glanced at Qin Chuan with slight astonishment and said with a tone of disbelief, "You have an elder who is a talisman array master, yet you actually have to rely on yourself to buy cultivation resources?" Qin Chuan scratched his head with slight embarrassment when he heard this. He made up an excuse and explained, "This is the training that my elder gave me. He wants me to develop the habit of being independent." "This isn't the main point." Kelly suddenly became excited. She stood up and walked quickly to Qin Chuan's side. She stretched out her hand to point at the 2 notices on the wall and said to Qin Chuan, "Are you sure that your elder can recognize the talisman array on these 2 notices? I can clearly tell you that this is at least a 4th-grade talisman array." A 4th-grade talisman array already belonged to the category of intermediate-grade talisman arrays. Only a 3rd-grade talisman array master or above could recognize it. Every 3rd-grade talisman array master was a distinguished guest of a large force. Their status was extraordinary, so Kelly couldn't help but be cautious. "I can be sure." Qin Chuan nodded without the slightest hesitation. Recognizing a talisman array wasn't a difficult matter for him. Although there was a great risk in doing so, once he succeeded, he would be able to obtain 200,000 gold coins. For the current him, this was absolutely a huge fortune. As the saying goes, wealth comes from danger. He would do this business. Seeing Qinchuan's confident appearance, Kelly's gaze towards Qinchuan couldn't help but become cautious. If Qinchuan wasn't lying, then there was at least a third-grade talisman array master standing behind him. A casual word from such a great figure could make her pack up and scram from Black City, never to see the sun of the second day. She absolutely couldn't offend him. "What are you going to do?" Kelly carefully opened her mouth and asked. If Qinchuan was going to tell the truth to the talisman array master behind him, then she would definitely stop Qinchuan without the slightest hesitation. What a joke! Would a third-grade talisman array master lack 200,000 gold coins? If by any chance she was misunderstood as instigating him, then even if she had 9 lives, it wouldn't be enough. Qinchuan had already thought of an excuse long ago. He replied, "My grandfather will let me recognize some talisman arrays every day. I only have to memorize these 2 talisman arrays and then bring them back as homework to ask my grandfather for advice. He will definitely guide me. At that time, I will say that I saw it on someone else's artifact and not you. Of course, it's best that you don't leak it out." "Grandfather?" Kelly deeply glanced at Qinchuan upon hearing this and said, "Don't worry, I will keep this secret and not tell anyone." Chapter 13. But before that, I would like to know who issued this notice. Qinchuan pointed to the notice on the wall and asked his question. He was sure that when he came here 2 days ago, there was nothing posted on the wall. Just 2 days ago, not only me, but all the shops in the entire Black City were put up with these 2 notices. Kelly replied without hesitation. Moreover, as far as I know, these 2 notices came from the city lord's mansion. With the power to post these 2 notices in all the shops, the person who issued them must be a high-level official in the city lord's mansion, or even the city lord himself. Hearing Kelly's answer, Qinchuan couldn't help but suck in a mouthful of cold air. He didn't expect that these 2 notices were actually related to the city lord's mansion. One must know that the city lord of Black City was rumored to be a powerful cultivator at the peak of building foundation stage. For a moment, Qinchuan's heart couldn't help but beat the drum of retreat. If by any chance he was targeted by the city lord's mansion because of the identification of the array glyphs, then it wouldn't be good. Taking such a big risk for 200,000, was it worth it? Just when Qinchuan's heart was hesitating, Kelly's phone suddenly rang. She took out the phone and glanced at it, then raised her eyes to look at Qinchuan with a strange look, and whispered, "I just got the notice that the city lord's mansion issued another order. The price of these 2 notices has changed. As long as you can identify one of the array glyphs, you will be given 200,000, and if you can identify both, you will be given 500,000. 500,000! This was a huge sum of money. It was more than twice as much as before. "Let's do it." Qinchuan fiercely clenched his teeth. Sure enough, riches and honor can only be found in danger. "I'll go back tonight and ask my grandfather. Tomorrow night I'll come back here. You prepare some body forging and advanced training resources that can help develop the brain for me in advance. I'll buy them at that time." Qinchuan stared at Kelly solemnly and said in a deep voice, "You can't let anyone know about my grandfather. Otherwise, I'll only get beaten up at most, but you'll lose your life." Qinchuan had to ensure that nothing went wrong when it came to the city lord's mansion. And to ensure that nothing went wrong, Kelly, as an insider, had to keep her mouth shut. Kelly nodded solemnly and said, "Don't worry, I'll keep it a secret." What a joke. Only an idiot would do something like offending a great figure like a talisman formation master. After receiving Kelly's promise, Qinchuan did not hesitate any longer and turned to leave. Regardless of whether Kelly was reliable or not, once the transaction was completed tomorrow night, he would immediately leave the Black City. For a short period of time, he would absolutely not set foot in the Black City again. He had to avoid the limelight first. Since she learned that Qinchuan's grandfather was at least a level 3 talisman formation master, Kelly's mood had been in a constant state of excitement. This was a level 3 talisman formation master. Even the speaker of the state capital of Qing had to respectfully address him as a master. Thinking that she was about to have a connection with such a great figure, Kelly's mood was excited and somewhat perturbed. If she reported the names of the 2 runes, it would inevitably attract the attention of the City Lord's mansion. If the City Lord's mansion asked about the origin of the names of the 2 runes, should she say it or not? If she said it, she would inevitably offend Qinchuan and the talisman formation master behind Qinchuan. If she didn't say it, then she would inevitably offend the City Lord's mansion. It could be said that it was extremely difficult to survive in the crack. Now, Kelly could only pin her hopes on the City Lord's mansion not being willing to delve into this matter and offend a level 3 talisman formation master. Otherwise, her future days would be really difficult. For the permanent residency in the Black City and the store's permanent property rights, I'll fight. Kelly fiercely gritted her teeth. Riches and honor were found in danger. If she didn't fight, how would she know it wouldn't work? When Qinchuan once again came to Kelly's store on the night of the second day, what he saw was Kelly with disheveled hair and 2 dark circles around her eyes. This gave Qinchuan a fright. Could it be that the City Lord's mansion had already received the news in advance and interrogated Kelly overnight? How could Qinchuan know that Kelly was so excited that she didn't sleep for the entire night and sat in the store for the entire day? Her emotions were too excited, causing her to become like this. Seeing that Qinchuan's face revealed a somewhat flustered expression, Kelly knew that Qinchuan had misunderstood. She hurriedly explained, "Don't be agitated. I was just a little excited last night and didn't sleep well. That's why I became like this. There's absolutely no third person who knows about our matter." Hearing Kelly's explanation, Qinchuan's heart also heaved a sigh of relief. Then, he sat down in front of the counter and whispered to Kelly, "Yesterday, I have already asked my grandfather. I already know the names of the 2 talisman arrays." While speaking, Qinchuan handed a piece of paper to Kelly. He wasn't worried that Kelly would embezzle the reward that belonged to her. Kelly looked at the piece of paper that Qinchuan handed over. Her eyes couldn't help but light up. She stretched out her trembling hand and took the piece of paper in her hand. She took a deep breath and said to Qinchuan, "Wait for me for a moment." After saying that, Kelly got up and went to close the store's door. She hung up the temporarily closed sign and then turned to Qinchuan and said, "Follow me to the back." Qinchuan didn't hesitate and followed behind Kelly into the store's backyard. At this time, if he showed any hesitation or timidity, it might be suspected by Kelly. Therefore, even if there was really any danger in the backyard, he had to show a fearless appearance. This kind of risk was something that he had to take. Kelly walked into her bedroom and soon came out with an AI. She placed the AI on the table and said to Qinchuan, "I will send the names of these 2 talisman arrays to the City Lord's mansion. As long as the City Lord's mansion accepts it, you will immediately receive a bonus of 500,000. "All right." Kelly took a deep look at Qinchuan and added, "I specially prepared a high-grade cultivation resource worth $1 million today. It is in the cabinet outside. I will bring it to you later." Qinchuan was stunned when he heard that. He asked in confusion, "Why is it $1 million? He clearly only had a bonus of 500,000. How could he afford a high-grade cultivation resource worth $1 million? Could it be that there was some secret in this transaction that he didn't know? You can't be thinking that it only costs 500,000 to invite a third-grade talisman array master, right?" Kelly chuckled and explained to Qinchuan, "I guess that this bonus of 500,000 is just a meeting gift. After this, the City Lord's mansion will definitely invite your grandfather to be a guest. Whether your grandfather goes or not, the City Lord's mansion will prepare a big gift for me to pass to your grandfather. When the time comes, this big gift will definitely fall into your hand." Moreover, I will also receive an extremely generous reward through this transaction. That extra 500,000 high-grade cultivation resource is just a small token of my appreciation. Don't reject it. Chapter 14. Black City's City Lord's Mansion was located in the center of Black City. It was the tallest tower in Black City with a total of 13 floors. The bottom 10 floors were public areas. It was the office area of the City Lord's Mansion's officials. From the 11th floor onwards, it was the private territory of the City Lord's Mansion. Anyone who entered without permission would be killed on the spot by the guard. Even cultivators were no exception. In front of the clear and tall floor-to-ceiling window stood a middle-aged man wearing a purple tuxedo. He was tall and straight with a grave and stern face. His whole body emitted a power that made people's heart palpitate. He was Black City's city lord, Chu Hua, a powerful cultivator at the peak of foundation establishment stage. Chu Hua had been standing in front of this floor-to-ceiling window for 3 whole days. In these 3 days, he didn't drink a single drop of water. His body also didn't move an inch. No one knew what he was thinking about and no one dared to disturb him. Da-da-da. A burst of crisp sound of high heels hitting the ground came from afar. A tall and beautiful figure wearing a black uniform slowly walked out from the shadows and stood behind Chu Hua. She respectfully said to Chu Hua, "My lord, there's news." Hearing the woman's words, Chu Hua slowly turned around and faced his assistant. His voice was low and deep. "Speak." The owner of a shop called Kelly's Little Store sent news. Those 2 talisman arrays were recognized by a talisman array master who happened to pass by and left behind the name of the talisman arrays. While speaking, Chu Ning handed a document to Chu Hua. The names of the 2 talisman arrays were written on it. Chu Hua reached out and took the document from Chu Ning's hand. He opened it and took a look. Immediately, those rippleless eyes of his suddenly burst out with a bright brilliance. Spirit receiving talisman array, spirit injecting talisman array. In this world, there are still people who can recognize these 2 talisman arrays. Good, very good. Chu Hua suddenly laughed out loud. His eyes were excitedly looking at the document in his hand. He loudly said, "With these 2 talisman arrays, this lord can expect to reach the gold core stage." Hearing Chu Hua's words, Chu Ning also happily laughed. "Congratulations, City Lord, congratulations, City Lord. How is it?" In the shop, Qin Chuan was extremely anxious. However, he couldn't show anything on the surface. He could only pretend as if nothing had happened and casually asked a question. "There's news." Kelly looked at the reply on the photon computer and said excitedly to Qin Chuan, "The reward has been transferred to the account I provided." Apart from the monetary gift, the City Lord's Mansion also sent over the property certificate of Kelly's Little Store as well as the identity card that symbolized his status as a permanent resident of Black City. "Very good," Qin Chuan immediately said to Kelly when he heard the news. "Give me the cultivation resources immediately, I'm leaving." Kelly already knew that Qin Chuan would leave immediately after hearing the news. She didn't hesitate and went to the cabinet with Qin Chuan. She took out a black leather backpack the size of a school bag and handed it to Qin Chuan. "This is a space bag made from the skin of a black-scaled python. Everything you need is inside. Take this backpack as my gift to you." The market price of a space bag was about 100,000 yuan. Although it wasn't cheap, it was still insignificant when compared to the permanent residence certificate and property certificate that she obtained. Qin Chuan didn't talk nonsense. He carried the backpack and went out. He walked quickly toward the elevator without stopping for a moment, fearing that he would be stopped if he was slow. Qin Chuan was right. At this moment, the City Lord's Mansion had already sent people to Kelly's Little Store. If he was slow for 3 minutes, perhaps he would have encountered them. Kelly stood at the entrance of the shop and watched Qinchuan's figure disappear into the crowd. Her face was full of determination. She was very clear that the people from the city lord's mansion were already on their way. If she let Qinchuan leave just like that, she would definitely offend the city lord's mansion. She might even receive some punishment. However, she didn't have a choice. If she didn't offend the city lord's mansion, then she could only offend the talisman array master behind Qinchuan. She chose the lesser of two evils. Compared to offending a talisman array master with a noble status, she was more willing to offend the city lord's mansion. Just when Kelly was about to turn around and return to the shop, a series of engine roars came from afar. Several luxurious black flying shuttles flew over at high speed and gradually stopped in front of Kelly's little store. Kelly couldn't help but widen her eyes when she saw the black flying shuttles that suddenly appeared. Only the city lord's personal guards were qualified to drive these shuttles. Could it be that the person who made the announcement was really the city lord? Just when Kelly was in shock, the door of the leading flying shuttle slowly opened. A tall and beautiful figure walked out from it. Kelly recognized this person with a single glance. She was the spokesperson of the city lord's mansion, the daughter of the city lord, Chu Ning. Chu Ning looked at Kelly indifferently and asked, "Where is the Grandmaster?" Facing Chu Ning's extremely oppressive aura, Kelly braced herself and said, "The Grandmaster has already left." Left? Chu Ning frowned slightly. "When did he leave?" "He has been gone for quite a while." Kelly lied. "I don't know where exactly he went. I didn't dare to ask too much and didn't dare to stop him." Hearing Kelly's answer, Chu Ning was slightly disappointed. However, she didn't have any intention to pursue the matter. She asked again, "Do you know what that array master looks like?" "I don't know. He was wearing a disguise mask." Kelly answered honestly. Although she had known Qinchuan for a long time, she really didn't know what Qinchuan looked like. Facing Kelly's ignorance, Chu Ning couldn't be bothered to continue kissing her. She could only instruct, "Remember, if that Grandmaster comes to your place again, you must inform the city lord's mansion immediately. When the time comes, you will definitely be rewarded." "Yes, I understand." Kelly nodded respectfully. As for what she was thinking in her heart, no one knew. Chu Ning didn't stay there for long. She directly boarded the flying shuttle and left. She didn't suspect whether Kelly was telling the truth. In her opinion, Kelly shouldn't have the guts to deceive the city lord's mansion. Moreover, facing a distinguished array master, even she wouldn't dare to say much. It was normal that Kelly didn't know anything. Moreover, she and the city lord didn't even think of stopping this array master immediately. They only needed to know that there was such an existence in the state capital of Qing. That was enough. As for other matters, there was still a long way to go. They could afford to wait and take it slowly. On the other side, Qinchuan had already boarded the elevator to leave Black City. Looking at the Black City that was getting further and further away from him, Qinchuan's nervous heart finally relaxed. It seemed that he should be able to leave safely today. Thinking of the 1 million high-grade cultivation resources in his backpack, Qinchuan's heart couldn't help but beat wildly. With this amount of cultivation resources, he would definitely be able to advance by leaps and bounds in the body tempering stage. Chapter 15. Chu Ning didn't go anywhere else and directly took the flying shuttle back to the city lord's estate. He once again arrived before the floor-to-ceiling window and stood before Chu Hua. When he saw Chu Ning return alone and so quickly, Chu Hua knew that Chu Ning's operation this time didn't go smoothly, so he asked, "You didn't see that talisman formation master?" "No, he left very quickly, and it was already too late when I arrived." Chu Ning shook his head and said, "But I've already instructed that if that talisman formation master appears again, the shop owner will notify us at the first possible moment." Chu Hua chuckled and shook his head. "It's useless. Even if that talisman formation master comes, the shop owner might not notify us. Chu Ning frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "How dare she? Do you think it's more dangerous to offend our city lord's estate or to offend a talisman formation master?" Chu Hua gazed indifferently at Chu Ning and said, "So long as that shop owner isn't an idiot, then she'll surely not betray that talisman formation master." When he heard Chu Hua, Chu Ning came to an understanding. Chu Hua was right. If one offended the city lord's estate, then one only had to leave Black City. But once one offended a talisman formation master, who would dare tolerate one? When he understood all of this, Chu Ning couldn't help but ask with slight bewilderment, "Then wouldn't that mean that we'll never be able to find that talisman formation master?" "No." Chu Hua shook his head and said, "Since he's willing to make a move, then it means that he's interested in the spirit absorption and spirit injection talisman formations. I don't dare say that in the entire Federation, but at least in the Qing state capital, there shouldn't be anyone besides us that possesses the methods to inscribe these two talisman formations. If he wants to learn the methods to inscribe these two talisman formations, then he'll surely take the initiative to look for us. We only have to patiently wait for him to deliver himself to us." Chu Ning's eyes couldn't help but light up when he heard Chu Hua's explanation, and he said with slight pleasant surprise, "As expected of father, you've indeed considered more thoroughly than me. But, father, I have a question." Chu Hua asked with slight bewilderment. "Why don't we directly ask those talisman formation masters we know, and instead use the method of posting notices to probe?" As the governor of Black City, Chu Hua held a high position in the state capital of Qing and knew many talisman formation masters. If Chu Hua was willing to step in, those talisman formation masters would definitely give Chu Hua face. Why bother? In response to Chu Ning's question, Chu Hua smiled faintly and said, "Most of the talisman formation masters in the state capital of Qing are level 2 talisman formation masters. Only the speaker's friend is a level 3 talisman formation master. The spiritual talisman formation and the spiritual talisman formation are both level 4 talisman formations. With their standards, it is impossible for them to inscribe them. As for the matter of posting the notice, how many people do you think are talisman formation masters among the people who enter and leave our Black City every day, and how many people would be interested in talisman formations that are like talismans? Even if someone was interested, would they be able to understand it? To tell you the truth, not to mention a level 2 talisman formation master, even the speaker's friend might not be able to recognize what these two talisman formations are. The talisman formation master that gave the answer at Kelly's store today, even if he isn't a level 4 talisman formation master, he is surely a knowledgeable peak level 3 talisman formation master. Otherwise, why would I only ask you to inquire about the information and not directly invite that talisman formation master as a guest? Not to mention me, even the lord behind our Black City alliance might not dare to offend an existence that has the potential to become a level 4 talisman formation master. Hearing Chu Hua's explanation, Chu Ning couldn't help but gasp. She never imagined that the mysterious talisman formation master would actually be a level 4 talisman formation master. After all, even in the entire Federation, level 4 talisman formation masters were existences that were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. They were great figures that even the Federation leader had to respectfully address as Grandmaster. If Qin Chuan were to hear Chu Hua's words, he would probably laugh his head off. Not to mention a level 4 talisman formation master. He wasn't even a level 1 talisman formation master. Chu Hua probably never imagined that there would actually be such a strange existence like Qin Chuan in this world. He was obviously not a talisman formation master, yet he just happened to have obtained a fortuitous encounter that allowed him to recognize various talisman formations with a single glance. It could be said to be extremely strange. I obtained this spirit absorption talisman formation and spirit injection talisman formation from a historical remnant. In the entire world, I'm afraid only we possess the method to inscribe them. I don't believe that this mysterious talisman formation master wouldn't be interested in them in the slightest. Chu Hua was already certain that the talisman formation master would surely come knocking on his door in the near future. At that time, exchanging the method to inscribe talisman formations for 2 sets of inscribed talisman formations shouldn't be excessive, right? At this moment it was already 11:50 at night. However, Qin Chuan still hadn't gone to sleep. At this moment, he was standing in Zhou Meng's office, and his gaze was filled with excitement as he looked at the sealed cultivation room before him. In another 10 minutes it would be Sunday. At that time, he would be able to use this luxurious advanced cultivation room. At that time, he would only need to sleep in the advanced resting cabin for 2 hours, and he would be able to use the rest of the time to cultivate. Time slowly passed. When the needle of the clock pointed to 12, Qin Chuan immediately used the authority that Zhou Meng had given him to open the door to the cultivation room and quickly walked in. Time was precious, and he had to seize every minute. Qin Chuan casually tossed his backpack to the side, and then quickly walked to the front of the resting cabin. Just as he was about to enter the resting cabin to rest, he suddenly froze on the spot. It turned out that there was already someone in the resting cabin. Looking at the girl who was lying in the resting cabin and only wearing a small singlet and sports shorts, Qin Chuan felt that his brain wasn't enough to process everything. Who am I? What am I doing? Who is she? Just as Qin Chuan was in a daze, the girl lying in the resting cabin seemed to have noticed something. She suddenly opened her eyes, and her gaze accurately locked onto Qin Chuan, who was standing outside the resting cabin. Her clear black and white eyes suddenly emitted a shocking murderous intent. At this moment, Qin Chuan felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. His entire body was stiff and he couldn't move. The feeling of being stared at by the Grim Reaper made Qin Chuan feel unwell. My name is Qin Chuan, and I'm Director Zhou's student. He was the one who asked me to come here to cultivate. Qin Chuan seemed to have exhausted all his strength to say this sentence. The moment his voice fell, he felt the murderous intent that had locked onto him suddenly recede like a tide. Without the murderous intent locking onto him, Qin Chuan's body felt light, and he almost sat on the ground. At this moment, the resting cabin's door slowly opened, and a pair of healthy, tanned, slender legs stepped out. The tall girl looked down at Qin Chuan and said in a cold voice, I will ask my father for confirmation. You better not lie to me, or you will die a horrible death. Chapter 16. Father? Hearing the way the girl addressed Zhou Meng, Qin Chuan seemed to have thought of something. He asked the girl in surprise, You're Director Zhou's daughter, Senior Zhou Lin? According to Qin Chuan's knowledge, Zhou Meng did have a daughter named Zhou Lin. However, he had only heard of her and had never met her. Zhou Lin put on her jacket and looked at Qin Chuan indifferently. Don't try to get close to me. As long as you didn't get my father's permission to come here, you're going to die. Qin Chuan was speechless. This woman was too unreasonable. She wanted to kill him with her mouth, and kill him with her mouth closed. However, when he recalled the feeling of falling into an ice cave, Qin Chuan had to admit that Zhou Lin did indeed have the ability to kill him. She could even kill him in an instant. Judging from her appearance, this woman was not much older than him. How could she emit such a terrifying aura? Could it be that she had already become a true cultivator? Thinking that Zhou Lin was most likely a cultivator, Qin Chuan could not help but feel excited and curious. This was the first time he had met a cultivator his age. He really wanted to ask Zhou Lin what it was like to become a cultivator. However, looking at Zhou Lin's unapproachable appearance, it was obvious that she did not want to chat with him. At this moment, Zhou Meng, who lived in the teacher's dormitory, had received the news and rushed over. He walked into the cultivation room in his pajamas. Looking at Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin standing on both sides of the lounge, he smiled and said, I originally planned to introduce you to each other during the day. I didn't expect you to be in such a hurry to cultivate. Qin Chuan scratched his head in embarrassment and said, I'm sorry. I didn't expect to cause such a misunderstanding. This was indeed a misunderstanding. If he had known that Zhou Lin would be here, he would not have gone near the lounge. He would have just slept on the floor outside. I am very gratified that you are able to cherish every minute and put more energy into cultivation. Zhou Meng did not intend to blame Qin Chuan. Instead, he appreciated Qin Chuan's actions. In this day and age, there were not many young people who were willing to race against time to cultivate. As he spoke, Zhou Meng turned to look at Zhou Lin and said, He's Qin Chuan. He's my student. He came here with my permission. He can be considered your junior. Zhou Lin glanced at Qin Chuan and said, Too weak. Qin Chuan felt his teeth hurt. Was he being looked down upon? However, compared to Zhou Lin, his strength was indeed a little too weak. Just one look from her was enough to scare him to the point that he didn't dare to move. If he wasn't weak, then what was he? Qin Chuan is a child from the slums. He has not received any systematic training since he was young. He also did not have good conditions, therefore, his foundation is a little weak. However, he still has talent. Zhou Meng was helpless against his daughter's straightforwardness. He could only defend Qin Chuan to prevent Qin Chuan's self-esteem from being hurt. Hearing Zhou Meng say that Qin Chuan was a child from the slums, Zhou Lin's eyes could not help but twitch. The cold expression on her face softened a little. She no longer had the coldness and indifference from before. You can have this lounge. I've rested enough. I'm going to train. Zhou Lin lowered her head to look at the time. Then, she looked at Zhou Meng and said, You can go back. It's fine. Okay. Zhou Meng nodded. Then, he looked at Qin Chuan and encouraged Qin Chuan, Work hard. If there's anything you don't understand, ask your senior. Thank you, Director. Qin Chuan smiled at Zhou Meng. Then, he turned to Zhou Lin and said, Thank you, Senior. Just like that, a small misunderstanding was resolved. Qin Chuan saw Zhou Lin walk to the training area and give up the lounge. He did not waste any more time. He sat in the lounge and prepared to rest. As soon as Qin Chuan entered the lounge, he smelled a very pleasant and light fragrance that made him feel very comfortable. He could not help but think of Zhou Lin. This is probably Senior's body fragrance. Let's sleep. This was Qin Chuan's first time sleeping in the lounge. In less than 2 hours, he woke up feeling refreshed and energetic. Qin Chuan walked out of the lounge and casually stretched his body. Just as he was about to start training, Zhou Lin suddenly appeared in front of him and casually threw him a set of clothes. This is my dad's training clothes. Go take a shower and change into it. Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan indifferently and said, I've seen your information. Your talent is not bad. Come find me later. After saying that, Zhou Lin did not give Qin Chuan a chance to speak. She turned around and walked towards the training area. Qin Chuan lowered his head and looked at the clean training clothes in his hands. They were of a suitable size. He suddenly felt a warmth in his heart. It had been a long time since he had experienced this kind of warmth. Soon, Qin Chuan finished washing up. He put on the training clothes and walked barefoot to the training area. He found Zhou Lin doing weighted squats. Looking at the 1,000-kilogram barbell on Zhou Lin's shoulder, Qin Chuan could not help but click his tongue. If it were him, he would not be able to lift the barbell, let alone do a steady squat. However, Zhou Lin looked like she was handling it with ease. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have dared to believe that Zhou Lin's body contained such astonishing strength. Zhou Lin gently put down the barbell and casually stretched her body. Then, she turned around to face Qin Chuan and said, Do you want to train with me? Qin Chuan was stunned for a moment. Then, he nodded without hesitation. Yes. To have such a powerful person teach him one-on-one was something he could not wish for more. How could he refuse? Hearing Qin Chuan agree, Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and said, "Now you still have the chance to regret it. Training with me is not an easy task." Qin Chuan shook his head and replied firmly, "As long as I can become stronger, I can endure any hardship. I can endure any hardship." "Very good." Zhou Lin nodded and said, "Let's go to the arena." Qin Chuan looked at Zhou Lin, who was walking towards the arena in confusion. Didn't she say that she wanted to train? Why did she want to go to the arena? When he stood in the arena and saw Zhou Lin in an offensive posture, Qin Chuan was a little dumbfounded. He stared at Zhou Lin with wide eyes and asked, "The training you said was to spar with me? Don't worry, I won't use my true qi." Zhou Lin looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "If we don't spar to understand your strength, how can I make a targeted training plan for you?" Hearing Zhou Lin's answer, Qin Chuan instinctively felt that something was wrong. However, Zhou Lin did not intend to give him a chance to think. She directly attacked. Chapter 17. Although Zhou Lin did not use her qi, she was still much stronger than Qin Chuan. She took a step forward, clenched her right hand into a fist, and swung it straight at Qin Chuan. Her speed was not fast, but her strength was extremely ferocious. If Qin Chuan was not careful, he would inevitably suffer. Facing Zhou Lin's small fist, Qin Chuan did not dare to be careless. He subconsciously chose to dodge. He took a step to the side and twisted his body. Just as he was about to dodge the punch, Zhou Lin suddenly lifted her leg and gently swept Qin Chuan's heel. This caused Qin Chuan to lose his balance and sit on the ground. "Do you think the enemy will only use their fists to attack you? What's the use of dodging the punch? If I wanted to kill you, that kick would have taken your life." Again. Once she started training, Zhou Lin became serious. She unceremoniously reprimanded Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan did not feel embarrassed. Instead, he seriously remembered Zhou Lin's words and got up from the ground. "This time, it's your turn to attack." Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan did not ask any more questions. He immediately launched an attack on Zhou Lin. "Your punch is too slow. Did you not eat enough? Your lower body is so unstable. Who gave you the guts to attack with your legs? This punch is soft and weak. It's not even comparable to a woman's. Are you still a man? Why are you grimacing? Does it hurt? If it hurts, then shout. I won't laugh at you." In the arena, Qin Chuan was panting heavily. His face was covered in sweat, and his training clothes were already soaked in sweat. At this moment, he felt pain all over his body. He felt as if his entire body was about to fall apart. If he could, he really wanted to lie down and have a good sleep. On the other hand, Zhou Lin's face wasn't red, her heart wasn't beating fast, and she wasn't panting. It was as if nothing had happened. She was looking at Qin Chuan with a pair of indifferent eyes, and there was a sneer and disdain in her eyes. "Didn't you say that you could endure any kind of hardship? It's only been less than an hour, and you can't hold on anymore?" Qin Chuan wanted to refute Zhou Lin's mockery, but he only had the strength to breathe. How could he have the strength to speak? He could only stare at Zhou Lin stubbornly, expressing his inner dissatisfaction. Seeing that Qin Chuan was unconvinced, Zhou Lin did not continue tormenting Qin Chuan. Instead, she leaped off the arena and walked to the side of the cultivation cabin. Then she waved at Qin Chuan and said, "Come here, take off your clothes and enter." Qin Chuan walked down the arena with some difficulty. He moved to the front of the cultivation cabin bit by bit. Before he could lift his hand to take off his clothes, Zhou Lin had already impatiently reached out and stripped off his clothes, leaving only a pair of black shorts. Looking at the bruises all over Qin Chuan's thin and weak body, Zhou Lin nodded with satisfaction. Then she pushed the weak Qin Chuan into the cultivation cabin and turned on the nutrition treatment mode. Soon, the cultivation cabin was filled with a dark green nutrient solution. Qin Chuan's face could not help but show a hint of pain. It was really too painful, but it was really so good. Qinchuan soaked in the nutrient solution. He felt as if there were countless small hands on his body, massaging and relaxing his muscles. This was a feeling he had never experienced before. It was simply too wonderful. However, happy times were always short-lived. In less than 20 minutes, Zhou Lin pulled Qinchuan out of the cultivation cabin. At this time, the bruises on Qinchuan's body had completely disappeared. He seemed to have returned to his peak state and even had a faint breakthrough. This unprecedented feeling of strength made Qinchuan excited. This beating was not in vain. Qinchuan looked at Zhou Lin with anticipation. He was looking forward to the fight as much as he was against it before. Don't think about it. With your current body condition, you can at most soak in the nutrient solution once a day. Any more and you won't be able to take it. Zhou Lin glanced at Qinchuan indifferently and said, "Put on your clothes and go train by yourself." Although he was a little regretful that he could not continue the wonderful experience just now, Qinchuan was also a very contented person. He quickly put on the clean training clothes, then walked to his backpack and took out the things inside. This backpack was called a space bag, but the space inside was at most the size of 2 backpacks. There were not many things that could be stored inside. 1 million cultivation resources only took up about half of the space inside. It was not filled at all. Qinchuan took out the cultivation resources and carefully counted them. There were a total of 100 packs of high-grade spirit powder, 100 high-grade nutrient paste, and a bottle of light purple liquid that emitted a soft light. This thing was called the purple spirit liquid. It was very beneficial for the development of the brain. Just this small bottle was worth at least 600,000 to 700,000 yuan. Looking at the cultivation resources on the ground, Qinchuan could not help but sigh. 1 million cultivation resources sounded like a lot, but in fact, it was only enough to support him to cultivate to the peak of the body tempering stage. This was under the condition that he was living frugally. In the future, the cultivation resources he would need would be an astronomical figure. Not to mention other things, just the nutrient solution he soaked in just now was definitely worth more than 1 million yuan. If Zhou Lin did not take the initiative to ask, he would never open his mouth to ask. Although Zhou Lin did not say anything, Qinchuan had already remembered this kindness in his heart. Now, he suddenly understood why Wang Wenxue agreed to be Lu Cheng's girlfriend. However, understanding was one thing, and whether or not she approved of it was another. Qinchuan shook his head forcefully. He stopped thinking about it and prepared to start the cultivation of the brain development. He picked up the bottle of purple spirit liquid and carefully poured out 3 drops. Then, he smeared them on his forehead. When the 3 drops of purple spirit liquid were evenly spread out by Qinchuan's fingers, his brain suddenly felt a cooling sensation. At this moment, his thoughts were emptied and he entered a state of confusion. This feeling came quickly and left just as quickly. In just a short 3 minutes, the purple spirit liquid lost its effect. Qinchuan had no choice but to withdraw from that state of emptiness. He closed his eyes and carefully sensed the changes in his body. He could clearly feel that his perception had become stronger, and he had a better understanding of his body. As expected of the purple spirit liquid, Qinchuan opened his eyes and looked at the bottle of purple spirit liquid in his hand. This bottle of purple spirit liquid had about 100 drops. In other words, it could allow him to cultivate in that state of emptiness for about 100 minutes. His brain development could increase by about 5%. However, when he thought about how he would not have the money to buy more once this bottle of purple spirit liquid was used up, Qinchuan could not help but sigh. It was indeed difficult for the poor to cultivate. Chapter 18. When Zhou Meng reappeared in the cultivation room, it was already noon. He had brought 2 sets of lunch. As soon as he entered the room, he saw Qin Chuan sitting cross-legged on the floor, meditating. Zhou Lin was also observing Qin Chuan from a distance. Zhou Meng carried the food to Zhou Lin's side and asked, "How do you feel?" Zhou Lin reached out and took the food from Zhou Meng's hands. She said, "He's very hard-working and can endure hardships." Zhou Lin and Qin Chuan had not known each other for long. Although she did not know much about him, she could still see some things. At least, hard-working and enduring hardships were two qualities that could not be faked. Children from the slums understand the value of strength and the difficulty of cultivation better than children from aristocratic families. It's only natural for them to be hard-working and able to endure hardship. Zhou Meng glanced at Qin Chuan, who was meditating, with gratification. He was quite satisfied with Zhou Lin's evaluation of Qin Chuan. "I just checked. He has a lot of meditation runes and cultivation resources for developing the brain. They're worth about $1 million. Are you sure he's really a child from the slums?" Zhou Lin looked at Zhou Meng with suspicion. How could a child from the slums casually take out cultivation resources worth $1 million? Zhou Meng was clearly shocked when he heard Zhou Lin's words. He did not expect Qin Chuan to have so many cultivation resources. However, when he thought about Qin Chuan's brain development, he felt relieved. Obviously, these cultivation resources were related to Qin Chuan's fortuitous encounter. Zhou Meng's thoughts were not wrong. After all, Qin Chuan's fortuitous encounter included the potential to become a talisman formation master and his outstanding eyesight. He had a fortuitous encounter. These cultivation resources should be related to his fortuitous encounter. Zhou Lin did not ask any more questions after hearing Zhou Meng's explanation. Everyone had their own secret. She was not interested in finding out what kind of fortuitous encounter Qin Chuan had. As long as the cultivation resources in Qin Chuan's hands were not stolen or snatched, it was fine. "I'm going back to school tonight." Zhou Lin sat down on a chair at the side, picked up the food, and started eating. She didn't care about her image. Zhou Meng was already used to Zhou Lin's carelessness, so he didn't say anything. Go back and cultivate well." Zhou Meng patted Zhou Lin's shoulder and said, "You still have a heavy burden on you. Perhaps when this kid grows up, he can help you share some of it." Zhou Lin was shocked. Him? Originally, Zhou Lin thought that Zhou Meng only helped Qin Chuan because of his pitiful background. She didn't expect that Zhou Meng had a deeper meaning behind it. "Although I'm not sure yet, I have a feeling that it's him." Zhou Meng looked at Zhou Lin seriously and said, "I believe in my own judgment and your evaluation of him." Zhou Lin suddenly put down her chopsticks and stood up. With a serious expression, she said to Zhou Meng, "I want to apply for leave from school for a week." Zhou Meng was a little surprised. Then, he thought of something and frowned. "You don't trust my judgment, so you want to observe him personally?" "Your judgment can't be wrong, but I'm afraid that his ability isn't good enough." Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan with a deep gaze and said firmly, "Only the strong can become my companion." Seeing Zhou Lin so determined, Zhou Meng stopped trying to persuade her. Letting Zhou Lin spend a week with Qin Chuan would be beneficial for Qin Chuan's growth. Coincidentally, it would also allow Zhou Lin and Qin Chuan to develop a tacit understanding. If they really had to fight side by side in the future, they wouldn't drag each other down. "I'll do as you say." Zhou Meng also wanted to see how far Qin Chuan could go in a week. Meditation runes used to be a very difficult task for Qin Chuan. He couldn't even completely meditate on the simplest clear water rune. However, it was different now. His brain had been greatly developed. At the same time, with the help of high-grade spirit powder, he was able to completely meditate on a low-grade yellow-level clear water rune in less than 10 minutes. Qin Chuan's heart skipped a beat. A pale golden rune slowly appeared on his palm. It was like a stream of water that slowly flowed in his palm, emitting a cool feeling. At this moment, as long as Qin Chuan was willing, this rune could turn into a puddle of clear water at any time to quench his thirst or wash his face. This was the first time Qin Chuan had experienced the mysteries of runes. It also made him look forward to becoming a self-cultivator. This clear water rune only persisted in Qin Chuan's palm for a moment before dissipating. At this moment, Qin Chuan felt that his body was clearly getting tired. Meditating on a rune was still a bit too strenuous for the current him. Just as Qin Chuan was about to start the next step of the thunder-devouring art cultivation, Zhou Lin suddenly squatted down in front of him. Seeing Zhou Lin's sudden appearance, Qin Chuan smiled slightly and asked, "Senior sister, is there anything I can help you with? My dad came by just now. He talked to me about you. Although your brain development is very high, your control of it is not high. Moreover, your physical fitness can't keep up with your current state. You should be able to feel it." Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan nodded slightly and answered honestly, "I can feel it. My current body is like an old optical computer with the latest chip installed. The optical computer can't support the chip at full speed. If I want to change this situation, I have to modify the optical computer." Zhou Lin nodded and said, "You have a clear understanding of yourself. Now, I have a way to help you completely control your current strength in a short period of time. However, you will have to pay a price. Are you willing to do so?" Looking at Zhou Lin's serious expression, Qin Chuan was somewhat curious. "Why are you so good to me? Just because of my identity as a slum dweller?" Qin Chuan was not a child who did not know anything. If it was only because of his identity, Zhou Meng and Zhou Lin would not have spared no effort to help him. Besides his fortuitous encounter, there must be something else that Zhou Meng and Zhou Lin paid attention to. It was just that he did not know about it yet. "Since you can sense it, at least you're not an idiot." Zhou Lin looked deeply at Qin Chuan. "However, you don't have the right to know these things now. After a week, if your performance can satisfy me, I will tell you some things. Now, I want your answer." Qin Chuan looked seriously at Zhou Lin and answered solemnly, "I'm willing." Qin Chuan was very weak. He also knew that he was weak. Therefore, he would not let go of any opportunity to become stronger. After receiving an affirmative answer from Qin Chuan, Zhou Lin reached out and patted Qin Chuan's shoulder lightly. "I'll wait for you at the school gate at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning." Chapter 19. The next morning, Qin Chuan arrived at the school gate at 5:30, and Zhou Lin was already there. Today, Zhou Lin was wearing a black combat uniform. The combat uniform clung to her body, vividly displaying her perfect figure. It was just that it was still early, and there was no one else besides Qin Chuan who could appreciate such a beautiful scenery. However, Qin Chuan wasn't in the mood to appreciate Zhou Lin's beautiful figure, because his eyes were completely attracted by the dark purple shuttle parked beside Zhou Lin. This was the super shuttle produced by the Federation's largest shuttle manufacturer, the Tianxing Corporation. It was called Skywalker 9, and it was different from other shuttles. The Skywalker 9 took the form of a motorcycle model. It looked cooler and more gorgeous, and its speed was also extremely fast. Its acceleration speed could reach an astonishing 700 kilometers per second, which was almost the limit of a small shuttle. This super shuttle was limited to 999 units in the entire Federation. It could be said that it was the ultimate dream of every man. Qin Chuan had also dreamed of driving this shuttle between heaven and earth. He never thought that one day he would be so close to this super shuttle. Zhou Lin didn't care about Qin Chuan's fiery gaze. She jumped on the shuttle and said to Qin Chuan, who was still standing by the side, "Sit at the back." After hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan immediately jumped on the shuttle and sat on the soft and comfortable back seat. Before he could stabilize himself, Zhou Lin had already started the shuttle. It swept across the sky like lightning and shot off. The moment the shuttle started moving, a thin layer of light purple protective film automatically formed and protected Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin from the wind resistance. Otherwise, Qin Chuan would have already flown out the moment the shuttle started moving. After experiencing the feeling of riding the Skywalker 9, Qin Chuan immediately returned to normal. He asked Zhou Lin curiously, "Where are we going now?" Zhou Lin did not answer Qin Chuan's question. She focused on driving the shuttle. After half an hour, they left the state capital of Qing and arrived at the wilderness outside the state capital of Qing. At this time, Zhou Lin still had no intention of stopping. She only stopped when the shuttle was 2,000 kilometers west of the state capital of Qing, at Yunlong Mountain. The Cloud Dragon Mountain was not a tourist attraction, nor was it a barren mountain. It was a paradise for wild beasts. Not to mention ordinary people, even refinement stage cultivators had to be careful in the Cloud Dragon Mountain. Otherwise, their lives would be in danger at any time. Qin Chuan had only heard of the Cloud Dragon Mountain before, but he had never personally come here. Now that he was in the Cloud Dragon Mountain, Qin Chuan could clearly feel that this place was extremely dangerous. Only by experiencing life and death battles can one break through and better control one's power. Zhou Lin stood beside Qin Chuan and looked at Qin Chuan indifferently. She said, "Next, you will spend 7 days in this mountain. In these 7 days, you may be safe and smooth, or you may encounter some danger. When you encounter danger, you don't need me to teach you what to do. You only have one chance to ask me for help. Once you ask, this operation is over." Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan could not help but widen his eyes. He looked at Zhou Lin in disbelief. This was the Cloud Dragon Mountain, where even refinement stage cultivators would encounter danger. How was it different from asking a little guy in the refinement stage to spend 7 days here alone? "What, are you afraid?" Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan mockingly. "You can ask me for help now. We can leave here immediately. Then you will be safe. Similarly, you can only envy others for having such a super shuttle for the rest of your life." Zhou Lin's faint mockery was like a sharp knife piercing Qin Chuan's ears. He also felt extremely uncomfortable. He gritted his teeth and said to Zhou Lin in an extremely firm tone, "I will try my best to survive." After receiving a positive answer from Qin Chuan, Zhou Lin left. Before leaving, she only left Qin Chuan a sharp alloy dagger, a day's worth of rations, and a day's worth of water. Other than that, there was nothing else. Qin Chuan carefully put away the rations and water in his backpack. He then held the alloy dagger tightly. After carefully observing the surrounding environment, he prepared to find a safe place to think about what to do next. However, Qin Chuan did not expect that before he could do anything, a gray wolf more than a meter tall suddenly jumped out of the woods. It bared its teeth and locked its greedy eyes on him in an instant. F***CK. Qin Chuan could not help but swear. This Zhou Lin had just left and he was already being targeted. What bad luck! This gray wolf clearly did not intend to coexist peacefully with Qin Chuan. The moment it locked onto Qin Chuan, it moved. It moved quickly with its powerful limbs and rushed towards Qin Chuan. With a leap, it pounced on Qin Chuan. Its sharp fangs were covered with saliva. It was obviously very hungry. Facing the gray wolf's bite, Qin Chuan abruptly twisted his body. At the same time, he raised his hand and fiercely slashed at the gray wolf's body. However, this hurried slash only managed to cut a little flesh on the gray wolf's body. It didn't cause much damage to the gray wolf. However, Qin Chuan's counterattack had completely angered the gray wolf. The gray wolf landed on the ground and roared, pouncing on Qin Chuan at an even faster speed. This caused Qin Chuan to be unable to react at all. After the gray wolf pounced on Qin Chuan, it immediately opened its bloody mouth and bit down on Qin Chuan's neck. Qin Chuan was quick-witted. He struggled to raise his hand and put the alloy dagger in the gray wolf's mouth. Then, he bent his leg and fiercely kicked the gray wolf's abdomen. The gray wolf howled and was actually thrown to the ground by Qin Chuan. At this time, Qin Chuan noticed that the gray wolf's stomach was slightly bulging. It seemed to be pregnant. His kick just now had coincidentally landed on the child in the gray wolf's stomach. This caused the gray wolf to suffer a heavy blow and howl. The imminent crisis of death caused Qinchuan's eyes to turn red. He struggled to turn over and forcefully stabbed the dagger in his hand into the gray wolf's stomach. Blood splattered and dyed the gray wolf's stomach red. At the same time, it also dyed Qinchuan's cheeks red. The scalding blood splashed on Qinchuan's face, causing his body to tremble. His eyes gradually regained clarity. Looking at the gray wolf that had gradually lost its strength to struggle under his hands, he realized that he had defeated the gray wolf and survived. Qinchuan sat on the ground with a plop. He gasped for breath. His face was full of the color of surviving a disaster. If it had been a male wolf or an unpregnant female wolf that had pounced on him just now, he might have been dead by now. Chapter 20. Although Qinchuan was very tired now and his whole body was soft as if he had no strength, he did not dare to stay here for long. He barely got up from the ground, then pulled out the alloy dagger from the stomach of the completely dead gray wolf and walked north without looking back. After moving forward for about 100 meters, Qinchuan finally could not hold on and sat down on the ground. He took out water from his backpack and took 2 sips. Then, he tore a piece of cloth from his body and soaked it with water to wipe the blood off his face. It was not that Qinchuan liked to be clean, but if the smell of blood was not dealt with, it was very likely to attract other beasts. With Qinchuan's current situation, if he encountered another beast, he would really die. After dealing with everything, Qinchuan leaned against the tree trunk and began to think about what to do next. In his current situation, it was best to find a safer place to hide and survive these 7 days. But if he really did this, even if he passed this assessment, it would be meaningless. He would not be able to get anything from this assessment. In the end, he had entered the Cloud Dragon Mountain to cultivate and become stronger, not to live an ignoble life. After understanding his purpose, Qinchuan made a decision. He wanted to fight crazily. Just when Qinchuan decided to fight all the way, a hissing sound suddenly came to his ears and he could smell a fishy smell. This made Qinchuan's expression change drastically. He almost subconsciously raised his hand and stabbed the alloy dagger into the tree trunk above his head. At the same time, he quickly rolled forward, away from the big tree behind him. Qinchuan got up from the ground and looked at the python that was more than 2 meters long and as thick as an arm that was nailed to the tree trunk by his dagger. A layer of fine sweat could not help but ooze out of his forehead. If his reaction had been a little slower just now, this python would definitely have bitten his throat in an instant and sucked his blood dry. It's really exciting. Qinchuan had lived for so long, but this was the first time he had experienced something so exciting. In less than 10 minutes, he had encountered danger twice, and this was only the beginning of the 7 days. Although he had almost died under the python's fangs, this experience had allowed Qinchuan to grow a lot. This was because he had suddenly realized the use of his perception in this wilderness survival. Just now, the reason why Qinchuan was able to accurately lock onto the python's location and stab it with his dagger was because his perception played a role in that critical moment, allowing him to predict the python's movement. Qinchuan had experienced this feeling once with Ma Zhen, and it was also a subconscious response. Senior sister is right. Only by experiencing life and death battles can I grow quickly. Qinchuan let out a long sigh of relief. If he could use his perception flexibly, the 7 days of his journey in the Cloud Dragon Mountain might have been much smoother. Walala! Next to a clear stream, a bare-chested teenager was squatting by the stream to deal with the fat fish in his hand. A bonfire had been set up next to him, and he was roasting wet clothes. The teenager put the processed fat fish into the branches, put the fat fish on the fire with a smile, then sat by the side and hummed a tune leisurely. This leisurely teenager was none other than Qin Chuan, who had entered the Cloud Dragon Mountain to gain experience. At this time, it was already the 6th day he had spent in this Cloud Dragon Mountain. Compared to the first day, he could be said to be like a fish in water now. He had a pretty good time. During these 6 days, Qin Chuan had to experience at least 4 battles with wild beasts every day. Sometimes it was an encounter, sometimes it was a night attack. Every time he faced a crisis, Qin Chuan cleverly used his perception to deal with the wild beasts and finally won. Although 6 days were very short, Qin Chuan's growth was extremely exaggerated. He was no longer the ignorant teenager who had strength but did not know how to use it. The dangerous Cloud Dragon Mountain had taught him how to skillfully use the skills and strength he had mastered to fight. At this time, Qin Chuan had a deep understanding of a principle, which was that the number of runes mastered and the level of brain development did not determine a person's strength. Only real combat strength was the only standard to test whether a person was strong or not. And now, Qin Chuan felt that he was moving in the right direction. Just as Qin Chuan was leisurely preparing to embrace the grilled fish that was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, a heart-palpitating roar suddenly came from the deep forest. An extremely powerful aura was rapidly approaching. After Qin Chuan sensed this powerful aura, his face could not help but reveal a dignified expression. He quickly got up and prepared to avoid the owner of this aura, but before he could do anything, a strong body barged into his line of sight in an extremely barbaric manner. It was a huge black bear that was 3 meters tall. Its body was as huge as a small mountain, and there were dozens of wounds on its body. Not only that, but one of its eyes was also destroyed, leaving only a blurry bloody hole, which added to its fierce aura. Looking at the huge black bear in front of him, Qin Chuan felt unwell. He had stayed in the Cloud Dragon Mountain for 6 days, and this was the first time he had encountered such a terrifying big fellow. This black bear is definitely not something I can deal with. Even though this black bear was already covered in wounds, Qin Chuan definitely did not think that he had the strength to challenge this black bear. Even if this black bear was not at its peak, if it wanted to kill him, it would only take a slap. It was fundamentally different from the wild beasts he had faced before. This was a big fellow that was infinitely close to a ferocious beast, and a ferocious beast had the strength to kill a cultivator at the chi refinement stage. Qin Chuan did not want to provoke such a terrifying big fellow and wanted to escape, but this black bear did not seem to want to let Qin Chuan escape. It stared at Qin Chuan with its single eye that emitted a terrifying murderous light that made one's heart palpitate. It suddenly opened its mouth and roared. It moved its thick legs and rushed toward Qin Chuan. This black bear's body was huge, but its movements were not slow at all. It waved its strong arms and slapped toward Qin Chuan. Before the black bear's palm could get close to Qin Chuan felt a burning pain on his cheek. If he was hit, he would be turned into meat paste on the spot. At the critical moment, Qin Chuan pounced and quickly fled into the bushes at the side. With the cover of the bushes, he quickly fled into the distance. Unless he was stupid, he would not stay and fight with this black bear. Chapter 21. Qin Chuan wanted to avoid the fight, but the black bear that seemed to be a ferocious beast wasn't willing to. It roared repeatedly, and every time its thick legs moved, the ground would tremble. Its huge body rampaged through the forest, completely ignoring the obstacles in front of it. Its only eye was focused on Qin Chuan's fleeing figure. In just a few breaths of time, the black bear had closed the distance between it and Qin Chuan. Even though Qin Chuan was running with all his might, he was still unable to shake off the black bear. This caused Qin Chuan's heart to sink uncontrollably. I can't continue like this. Although this big guy is injured, its stamina is much better than mine. If I continue to run like this, the first person to give up will definitely be me. When that time comes, I'll really be finished. After thinking through this, Qinchuan's handsome face couldn't help but reveal a sinister expression. Since he couldn't escape, then he might as well get rid of the big guy behind him. When this thought appeared in Qinchuan's mind, Qinchuan made a decision without any hesitation. He turned around and quickly approached a thick tree on his left. It was so thick that it would take 3 people to wrap their arms around it. He climbed up the tree nimbly, and in the blink of an eye, he scuttled into the dense canopy of the tree and disappeared. At this moment, the black bear finally caught up. When it saw Qinchuan's figure scuttling into the canopy and disappearing, it immediately roared angrily and charged towards the tree in an extremely barbaric manner. It used its arm to violently smash into the trunk of the tree, causing a rumbling sound. Although the tree was thick, it couldn't help but tremble under the powerful impact of the black bear. It let out waves of mournful cries, as if it could break at any time. Qinchuan, who was hiding in the tree, tried his best to hug a branch of the tree. Through the gaps in the leaves, he looked down at the crazily roaring black bear below. The corner of his mouth couldn't help but twitch fiercely. He cursed in a low voice, "Damn it, your injuries weren't caused by me. Why are you fighting me? Do you think I'm easy to bully?" The black bear couldn't understand Qinchuan's words, nor could it hear him. At this moment, it seemed to have treated the tree as Qinchuan. It roared and viciously smashed into the tree trunk again. This time, the tree trunk clearly tilted. If it were to smash into it again, the tree wouldn't be able to hold on. At this moment, Qinchuan, who was hiding in the tree, became nervous. His pair of eyes stared fixedly at the black bear below, focused and fierce. Just as Qinchuan's eyes had expected, the black bear couldn't wait to launch a third. This time, the powerful impact to no avail. The tree's finals to the back of the tree trunk. This time, the powerful impact finally broke the tree trunk's last, the tree to the tree trunk, to the back. It to the trees to the back to no end. To the tree to the back of the tree fall, and it to the back to it. B2. T to be lost, twos to be supported, to be there. Without the tree it T, without the tree S, and without the support. It's to the. Of it to. It to it. Was. Go to hell. Qinchuan's left hand gripped the black bear's hair tightly, and his right hand gripped the alloy dagger tightly. He viciously stabbed at the black bear's one eye. Poochie! Qinchuan's alloy dagger pierced the black bear's eye socket when the black bear was unprepared. He twisted the dagger and stabbed the black bear's one eye into a bloody mess. The black bear immediately went berserk. It roared, raised its claws, and viciously slapped at Qinchuan, who was standing on its shoulder. It was too late for Qinchuan to dodge. He could only raise his arms to block. The next moment, a tremendous force surged toward Qinchuan and instantly broke his arms. Qinchuan flew out from the black bear's shoulder like a kite with a broken string and crashed to the ground. The intense pain from his broken arms made Qinchuan's forehead break out in a thin layer of cold sweat. He gritted his teeth and resisted the urge to let out a heart-wrenching wail. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the crazy black bear. After confirming that the black bear had not discovered his position, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Immediately, his pale face showed a touch of pain. He tried to stand up from the ground. He only moved a little, but his whole body hurt so much that he could not stand up at all. This dog's strength is a bit too much. Qinchuan grinned. Fortunately, he blocked it with his arms. If he was hit in the head or chest, he could directly say goodbye to this world. Since he could not move, Qinchuan did not struggle anymore. He just lay on the ground and quietly watched the black bear go crazy. However, to Qinchuan's surprise, the black bear gradually calmed down after going crazy for a while. Its nose twitched as if it was sniffing something. Seeing this scene, Qinchuan's expression immediately changed. This big black bear can't really be a dog, right? Just as Qinchuan was feeling apprehensive, the big black bear suddenly roared. It turned its head and ran towards Qinchuan's direction. Qinchuan saw this and could not help but feel his heart sink. The thing he was most worried about had happened. Even though his whole body hurt terribly, Qinchuan had no choice but to struggle to stand up in order to save his life. He tried his best to run to the side, trying to find a place with many trees and complicated terrain. The black bear did not have eyes. Even if it could lock onto his position through smell, it could not see those obstacles. Just as Qinchuan expected, the black bear relied on its huge body to run rampant in the forest. However, the loss of its vision also caused a lot of trouble for the black bear. Its speed inevitably slowed down, and sometimes it even accidentally hurt itself. However, the more injured it was, the more irritable the black bear became, and the crazier its roars were. The black bear was in great pain, and so was Qinchuan. His current situation was not much better than the black bear's. The pain of his broken arms constantly stimulated Qinchuan's nerve. The large amount of blood loss made Qinchuan's head dizzy. If it was not for the threat of the black bear in front of him, Qinchuan really wanted to lie down and have a good sleep. Qinchuan didn't know how long he had been wandering around the forest, nor did he know how long the black bear had been roaring behind him. It was only when the sky gradually darkened that the black bear, who had been crazy for the entire day, finally couldn't hold on any longer. Its huge body, which was like a small mountain, was now sprawled on the ground, panting violently like a bellows. The severe exhaustion of its physical strength and the loss of a large amount of blood had caused the black bear to almost reach the end of its life. On the other side, Qinchuan's situation was not much better. He was now lying less than 20 meters away from the black bear. If the black bear charged again, it could easily trample him into meat paste. It was not that Qinchuan did not want to pull away from the black bear, but he really could not move. If I die like this, it's not that embarrassing, right? This was Qinchuan's last thought before he fainted. Chapter 22. In the cultivation room, Zhou Meng looked at Qinchuan, who was lying unconscious in the healing pod. He then looked at Zhou Lin, who was standing at the side with an expressionless face. His face couldn't help but twitch violently. He said to Zhou Lin with some blame, "You're too rash. Aren't you afraid that he will really die in Cloud Dragon Mountain?" Thinking back to the time when Zhou Lin carried Qinchuan back, Zhou Meng still had a lingering fear. He only knew that Zhou Lin took Qinchuan out to gain experience, but he didn't expect that Qinchuan was still alive and kicking when he left and came back covered in blood. "With me here, he won't die." Zhou Lin faintly replied Zhou Meng, "I'll leave the rest to you." "I'm leaving." Zhou Lin asked for a 7-day leave from the school. Now that 6 days had passed, it was time for her to return. Hearing that Zhou Lin wanted to return to the school, Zhou Meng didn't stop her. He only looked at Zhou Lin curiously and asked, "You said that you wanted to personally test Qinchuan, what was the result?" Zhou Lin's eyes were slightly subtle as she looked at Qinchuan lying in the healing pod. She said to Zhou Meng, "When he wakes up, tell him that I'll be waiting for him at the Cosmic Star Academy." After saying this, Zhou Lin didn't wait for Zhou Meng's response and directly turned to leave. Looking at Zhou Lin's departing figure, Zhou Meng couldn't help but smile with some gratification. He muttered in a low voice, "This brat is really reliable." When Qinchuan woke up, it was already noon of the second day. Although he suffered serious injuries, after lying in the healing pod for a day, he had almost completely recovered. Standing on the floor of the cultivation room, Qinchuan casually moved his body. Feeling the abundant strength in his body, he couldn't help but grin. As the saying goes, one who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune later on. Qinchuan felt that he had made a big profit on this trip to the Cloud Dragon Mountain. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he could beat 100 Mahjong right now. Even if he were to face that big black bear again, Qinchuan might not be afraid. Looking at the excited Qinchuan, Zhou Meng coughed softly and said, "Don't be complacent just because of a small achievement. Compared to the real experts, you are still far behind." Of course, Qinchuan knew that he was still far from being a real powerhouse. After being excited for a while, he calmed down and asked Zhou Meng, "Director, where's Senior's sister?" Qinchuan knew very well that it must have been Zhou Lin who had saved him, that he was able to return to the cultivation room to receive treatment. Not only that, the wild beasts he had encountered in the Cloud Dragon Mountain these past few days, as well as the big black bear that seemed to be a ferocious beast, must have been specially arranged by Zhou Lin for him. Now, he didn't know if he had fulfilled his promise, so he wanted to ask Zhou Lin in person. "Her holiday is over. She went back to school after dropping you off yesterday," Zhou Meng calmly said to Qinchuan, "but she told me to leave a message for you. She will wait for you at the Cosmic Star Academy." Hearing Zhou Meng's reply, Qinchuan couldn't help but be slightly surprised. He knew about the Cosmic Star Academy. It was one of the 6 great academies and was famous throughout the Federation. He had previously guessed that Zhou Lin was a student of the 6 great academies, but he didn't expect Zhou Lin to be a student of the Cosmic Star Academy. According to Qinchuan's knowledge, although the Cosmic Star Academy was one of the 6 great academies, it was ranked 6th. Its comprehensive strength could only be considered average among the 6 great academies. Qinchuan's ideal university was the number 1 among the 6 great academies, Star Dragon First Academy. To be able to be named after the Federation and be crowned as number 1, Star Dragon First Academy was worthy of being called the strongest academy in the Federation. Entering the Star Dragon First Academy was also Qinchuan's dream. Although Zhou Lin had been really good to him during this period of time, he was unwilling to give up the opportunity to enter the Star Dragon First Academy because of this. Seeing Qinchuan's tangled expression, Zhou Meng pursed his lips, sighed and asked, "Qinchuan, tell me, is your dream to enter the Star Dragon First Academy?" Qinchuan was slightly surprised. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded honestly and said, "This has always been my dream. Kindness was kindness, and dreams were dreams." Qinchuan didn't want to mix the two together. Hearing Qinchuan's answer, Zhou Meng's face slightly darkened. He took out a pack of cigarettes from his shirt pocket, lit one and took a deep breath. Then he said to Qinchuan, "Come, let's sit over there and have a good chat. After listening to what I have to say, if you still insist on entering the Star Dragon First Academy, then I won't stop you." Qinchuan followed Zhou Meng to the lounge and sat down on the soft sofa. Zhou Meng didn't start talking immediately. He kept smoking until he finished one cigarette and lit another one. Only then did he start talking to Chuntang. In this world, 80% of the wealth is in the hands of 20% of the people. Similarly, 80% of the cultivation resources are in the hands of 20% of the people, and these 20% of the people are aristocratic families and sections. It's not difficult for ordinary people like us to obtain some ordinary cultivation resources, but if we want to obtain some higher-level cultivation resources, it's extremely difficult. In the Federation, there are only 2 ways to obtain high-level cultivation resources. The first way is to join the army and become a glorious soldier of the Federation army. Through constant battles on the battlefield, you accumulate military merits, and then use those merits to exchange for high-level cultivation resources. The second way is to submit to the aristocratic families and sects and become their vassals, or even lackeys. At this point, Zhou Meng took a big puff of his cigarette. As he exhaled, he said in a low voice, "Not all ordinary people are willing to join the army and risk their lives on the battlefield to accumulate military merits in exchange for cultivation resources. Most people choose to submit to the aristocratic families and sects after encountering some setback. They use the aristocratic families and sects as a condition in exchange for high-level cultivation resources. Do you know the consequences of these people doing this? Without waiting for Qinchuan to answer, Zhou Meng answered himself. Over time, the aristocratic families and sects' control and influence over the Federation will grow. If ordinary people like us want to stand out, we have to look at their faces. If we're unwilling to submit to them and become their vassals, even if we choose to join the army, they have thousands of ways to send us to the most dangerous battlefield and let us die on the battlefield. Qinchuan, I'm not trying to scare you, nor am I trying to scare you. I'm talking about the current situation of the Federation. Our seemingly powerful Federation has long been corrupted by those maggot-like aristocratic families and sects. If we can't change the current situation, the Federation's collapse will be right in front of us. Chapter 23. Qinchuan was dumbfounded as he stared at Zhou Meng, who was roaring furiously. He didn't think that Zhou Meng was lying to him. Perhaps the Federation was beyond cure, but what did that have to do with him entering a university? Zhou Meng couldn't possibly tell him that his university application would affect the future of the Federation, right? That would be too exaggerated and unrealistic. Zhou Meng calmed himself down and took a deep breath. He continued to speak to Qinchuan. You must be curious about what I'm saying and what it has to do with the First Academy of Stardragon, right? Qinchuan nodded honestly. Indeed, he was curious about what Zhou Meng's words had to do with the First Academy of Stardragon. In our Federation, there are hundreds of aristocratic families. Among them, there are 4 most powerful aristocratic families. The First Academy of Stardragon was founded by these 4 aristocratic families. Rather than saying that the First Academy of Stardragon is a university, it's more like a tool for the aristocratic families to nurture their descendants and select the best talents among the commoners. Zhou Meng's words were like thunder that exploded in Qinchuan's mind. He never thought that the First Academy of Stardragon had such a background story. I don't have to lie to you about this because it's not a secret. You can just use your optical supercomputer to search for information about the First Academy of Stardragon. Of course, the information wouldn't be so explicit. Zhou Meng sneered and said to Qinchuan, anyone who enters the First Academy of Stardragon will be recorded by the aristocratic families. They will secretly contact those who perform well. If they're willing to join them, that's good. If they're not, then they'll have a hard time in the academy. In the end, they'll either submit to the aristocratic families or withdraw from the academy. After withdrawing, they'll realize that it's just the beginning of a disaster. After a period of torture, they'll realize that they have no other choice but to join the aristocratic families. Looking at the serious expression on Zhou Meng's face, Qinchuan was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe it and didn't dare to believe it. Zhou Meng's words had completely overturned the glorious image of Star Dragon Academy in his mind. Don't the big shots of the Federation care? Qinchuan asked sharply. He didn't believe that these people could be so lawless. Care? How was he going to manage it? Those are the 4 great families. Zhou Meng laughed disdainfully. Do you know what the 4 great families mean in the Federation? You may not know who the leader of the Federation is, but you must know who the leaders of the 4 great families are. If you offend the leader of the Federation, you can still become a fugitive. But if you offend the 4 great families, you won't even be able to die. Qinchuan fell silent. Zhou Meng's words had a great impact on his worldview. He lived in a peaceful world. Could it be that everything he saw was just an illusion? Think about Wang Wenxue. Zhou Meng decided to give Qinchuan a final dose of medicine. I used to think highly of Wang Wenxue and had high hopes for her. But when faced with the temptation of cultivation resources, what did she do? She had chosen to become Lu Cheng's girlfriend and to rely on the Lu family. She had sold her body and soul. Then look at Ma Jun. He had beaten up so many students. Why is he still able to get away with it? That's because the people he beat up were all commoners. If you were a child of an aristocratic family, do you think Ma Jun would have had the guts to stop you at the school gate that day? Zhou Meng's words were like a sharp knife that ruthlessly pierced Qinchuan's heart. It hurt so much that Qinchuan's heart was bleeding. Zhou Meng's previous words could be covered by hearsay. But the matter between Wang Wenxue and Ma Jun had happened in front of his eyes. He couldn't pretend that he didn't know anything, nor could he deny it. This was the bloody truth. Seeing that Qin Chuan had lowered his head in silence, Zhou Meng sighed softly and said, "In this world, not everyone is willing to become a vassal of aristocratic families and sects, and do things according to their whims. We have worked hard for generations to establish Starry Sky Academy. Step by step, we have developed Starry Sky Academy into one of the 6 great academies. Our purpose in doing all this is to provide a peaceful cultivation environment for those who are unwilling to submit to the aristocratic family or sect, so that those commoner geniuses can go further on the path of cultivation, so that they can influence more people and work hard to reverse the current situation of the Federation. Now, I would like to extend a sincere invitation to you. I hope that you can join us and become one of us. Everyone will work together to purify the dark clouds that are shrouding the Federation." Facing Zhou Meng's invitation, Qin Chuan was a little stunned. To be honest, he didn't expect things to develop like this. He was just an ordinary high school student who at most had a little fortuitous encounter. At this time, someone suddenly jumped out and said to him, "Let's change the Federation together." It would be a miracle if he agreed. "I'm sorry, Qin Chuan tried hard to organize his words and said to Zhou Meng, "I'm just an ordinary person." Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Zhou Meng wasn't disappointed. He chuckled and said to Qin Chuan, "I can understand you. If I were you, it would be difficult for me to agree immediately. After all, this kind of thing sounds a little too crazy and unrealistic. But it doesn't matter, we will wait for you. We will wait until the day you understand. We won't interfere with your life too much. It's your right to choose which university you want to enter. I believe that when you truly realize the darkness and filth of this world, you'll have the same thoughts as us. When that time comes, I'll warmly welcome you to join us." "That's right," Zhang Tai said with a smile. Zhou Meng left without saying anything more. Just as he said before, he wouldn't interfere with Qin Chuan's choice after he said what he needed to say. All the future development would depend on Qin Chuan's decision. At this time, Qin Chuan was very confused. He didn't know whether he should believe Zhou Meng's words or not, but his intuition told him that Zhou Meng had no reason to deceive him with such an absurd lie. It wouldn't do Zhou Meng any good. So, maybe what Zhou Meng said was true. These things are still too far away. They have nothing to do with me for the time being. Qin Chuan took a deep breath. He clenched his fists and murmured in a low voice, "I'm still too weak now. Even if I make a choice, I can't change anything. As Director Zhou said, I still have time to experience this world and discover the darkness and filth. If I really have the ability to change all of this, then I will do it." Chapter 24. Qin Chuan's mind was in a mess as he walked out of the cultivation room. He was prepared to leave the school and return home to rest for the day. As for the matter of applying for leave, naturally, Zhou Meng would handle it for him. What he needed to do now was to seriously think about how he should proceed in the future. Qin Chuan lowered his head as he walked in the crowd. The noise in his ears suddenly stopped. He sensed something and raised his eyes to look in front of him. The tall and burly Ma Jun blocked his path with a ferocious expression. His expression was as if he couldn't wait to eat him alive. "You really know how to hide. I've been looking for you all this time." Ma Zhen really hated Qin Chuan to the point of gnashing his teeth. Ever since he was discharged from the hospital, Ma Zhen had been searching everywhere for Qin Chuan. He wanted to take revenge on Qin Chuan. However, a week had passed and he hadn't even seen a shadow of Qin Chuan. Today, he finally heard news that Qin Chuan had appeared in the school. He immediately brought people over and blocked Qin Chuan in time. Today, he must give Qin Chuan an unforgettable lesson. He must let Qin Chuan know that there were some people in this world that he couldn't afford to offend. Facing the fiendish Ma Zhen, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and asked, "If I were a child of a big family, would you still treat me like this?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Ma Zhen seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. He reached out his hand and patted Qin Chuan's cheek. With a look of disdain, he said, "A child of a big family? You think you're worthy? Why don't you take a piss and take a good look at yourself? Why are you daydreaming in the middle of the day?" When Ma Zhen's companions heard this, they all burst into laughter. Each and every one of them looked at Qin Chuan with disdain and contempt. He was just a piece of trash struggling to make a living in the slums. He actually wanted to become a disciple of a big family. That was simply wishful thinking. Qin Chuan was surprisingly calm as he looked at the undisguised ridicule and disdain on the faces of the people in front of him. He knew that Ma Zhen did not take his idea seriously at all because he was a commoner. No matter how much he imagined, he could never become the son of an aristocratic family. "Get out of the way, I don't want to fight today." Qin Chuan suddenly lost interest in talking to these people. He just wanted to quickly return home, lie quietly on his bed, empty his mind, and have a good sleep. "Move aside? I think it's better if I send you to the hospital to accompany your best friend." Ma Zhen coldly snorted. It was not easy to block Qin Chuan today. How could he let the open-minded Qin Chuan leave so easily? Hearing Ma Zhen mention Wang Bo, Qin Chuan's eyes suddenly became sharp as he looked at Ma Zhen. He said in a deep voice, "What did you guys do to Wang Bo?" What else could it be? Since Brother Zhen made a move, it's natural to break his legs. Ma Zhen's lackey laughed sinisterly. He reached out to push Qin Chuan away, but unexpectedly, Qin Chuan suddenly reached out and grabbed his wrist. "You shouldn't have touched Wang Bo." Qin Chuan coldly stared at the crowd. He suddenly exerted strength in his hand. Accompanied by a crisp sound, that lackey's wrist was actually broken by Qin Chuan. The excruciating pain from the broken wrist caused the lackey to subconsciously open his mouth and let out a blood-curdling scream, like a pig being slaughtered. Ma Zhen was shocked when he saw this. He immediately became furious and coldly said, "Beat him to death." Following Ma Zhen's order, the surrounding crowd immediately pounced on Qin Chuan with ferocious expressions. However, how could these guys who only attacked ordinary people be a match for Qin Chuan, who had experienced life and death battles? Without waiting for these people to surround him, Qin Chuan had already taken the initiative to attack. Like lightning, he repeatedly kicked out. Every kick accurately landed on these people's knees, ruthlessly breaking their legs. Ow, ow, ow. Waves of blood-curdling screams sounded one after another. Ma Zhen's 6 lackeys were all lying on the ground in the blink of an eye. Their faces were all distorted and frighteningly pale. Seeing this scene, Ma Zhen couldn't help but widen his eyes in horror. He originally thought that he had paid enough attention to Qin Chuan, but he didn't expect Qin Chuan to be so powerful. In just an instant, he had killed all his lackeys. Seeing Qin Chuan approaching him step by step, Ma Zhen couldn't help but swallow his saliva in fear. He put on a strong front and shouted loudly at Qin Chuan, "Qin Chuan, what are you doing? This is a school. How can I let you do as you wish?" Hearing Ma Zhen scream, Qin Chuan sneered, "Now you know that this is a school?" As he spoke, Qin Chuan had already walked in front of Ma Zhen. He punched Ma Zhen's abdomen fiercely, causing Ma Zhen's snot and tears to flow out. His hands covered his stomach as he knelt on the ground and vomited. He almost vomited out his stomach acid. The surrounding students looked at the scene in front of them and were all dumbfounded. No one would have thought that Ma Jun, the tyrant of the school, would fall into the hands of Qinchuan once again. And this time, he fell even more thoroughly. Wang Wenxue, who had rushed over after hearing the news, stood among the crowd. She looked at Qinchuan in shock, as if she couldn't believe what she saw with her eyes. This Qinchuan was so unfamiliar and cold. I was wrong. I really know that I was wrong. Ma Jun knelt on the ground and looked at Qinchuan's feet. His face was no longer arrogant and domineering. Now it was full of horror and fear. If he had known that Qinchuan was so powerful, he wouldn't have found trouble with Qinchuan no matter what. I don't mind you finding trouble with me. But why did you touch Wang Bo? Is it because Wang Bo is a commoner and doesn't have a strong family background? After hearing Zhou Meng's words today, Qinchuan was extremely disgusted with people like Ma Jun who bullied the weak and feared the strong. This kind of person was even worse than the dire beasts of Yunlong Mountain. At least the dire beasts could treat everyone equally. You broke Wang Bo's legs. I'll break your legs too. Then we're even. Qinchuan looked at Ma Jun indifferently. He lifted his leg and kicked Ma Jun to the ground. Just as he was about to break Ma Jun's legs, Wang Wenxue suddenly appeared in front of him and stopped him. Qinchuan, that's enough. Wang Wenxue looked at Qinchuan anxiously and said, You can't, shut up. Qinchuan interrupted Wang Wenxue's words. He looked coldly at the shocked Wang Wenxue and said in a deep voice, Woman, if you want to stop me, I'll break your legs too. Wang Wenxue was also a commoner. Everyone had the same status. Why didn't she stop Ma Jun when he broke Wang Bo's legs? Now that he wanted to return the favor, she wanted to stop him? Qinchuan, enough is enough. Suddenly, a tall figure slowly walked out from the crowd. He looked calmly at Qinchuan and said indifferently, Little Shui is my girlfriend. You want to break her legs. Do you have any respect for me? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.